I'm gonna slate her for presentations before the housing plan. All right, it's 7 o'clock. Let's get the show on the road. Tell me when you start recording.
Good to go, Mayor.
Good evening, everybody. Happy Monday, July 27th. Welcome to the Ferndale City Council meeting coming at you via Zoom. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I predict at the end of our Zoom meetings, we will all be in unison. Next, Madam Clerk, can we have roll call, please?
Councilmember James?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Leaks May?
Here.
Councilmember Mikulski?
Here.
Councilmember Polika?
Here.
And Mayor Piana?
Here. Next on the agenda is approval of the agenda.
Madam Mayor, I move to approve the agenda with a slight amendment of pulling 7B from the consent agenda and adding it to the regular agenda.
Okay. All right, there's a motion with the slight change. Is there support?
Support.
All right. Moved by James, supported by Leaks May. And 7B now becomes, on the consent agenda, now becomes 8C on the regular. Madam Clerk?
Councilmember James?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Leaks May?
Yes.
Councilmember Mikulski?
Yes.
Councilmember Polika?
Yes.
And Mayor Piana?
Yes. Next is the electronic meeting procedures. Basically, we're in a holding pattern of continuing electronic meetings, and our governor has extended the Open Meeting Act for electronic council meeting procedures until the end of the COVID emergency, whenever that might be declared by the governor. So this is the holding pattern for a while, and it is not ideal, but it is where we're at. I wish, but I also wish to do it safely. With that, we'll go to the call the audience appropriate time. All right, moving on to presentations. And up first on 5A is the presentation of the July Beautification Awards. And I believe we have Robin and Suzanne from the Beautification Committee here to present. Who is leading this tonight?
Well, that would be me.
Welcome.
Hi. Thank you, Council. And let's just get right into the awards. I will be sharing my screen. All right, so the July Ferndale Beautification Awards. The first winner is in the Northwest Quadrant. This is 335 East Woodland. It is a home owned by Justin and Melissa Lefevre. And we've watched it grow in over the last month or two. It's been quite nice seeing the hops growing across the front of the house. The tomato plants out by the roadside really getting into their summer glory. And so we wanted to congratulate Justin and Melissa for their good work. Are you here with us, Justin, Melissa?
What was that last name, Robin?
Lefevre, Lefevre.
I don't see anybody with that name.
Okay, very well. Then we'll move on to the next. In the southeast quadrant, we have 671 Channing. This home we thought was a very nice, clean design for the quadrant. They were nominated along with a couple of other homes. This one is owned by Andrew Decker. Are you with us, Andrew? Well, it appears last month we had a full house, everyone, so now we got no one showing. So we'll go on to the third then. Our southwest quadrant winner is 876 Marshfield. We liked the clean look of the home. It's very well kept. The plantings have been done wonderfully. And this house is owned by Paul Yost and Kevin Kuznia. Are either of you here?
I don't see him. If you are here, though, and your name is different than what Robin is reading, go ahead and raise your hand and I'll call on you.
Okay. The next quadrant is northwest, and it's 290 West Maplehurst. This house is owned by Stephen Davis and Jacob Kraus. And we thought they had done a lovely job in designing the landscape out front. And so are you with us, Stephen?
Yep, we do have that one.
Okay. So
Hello.
can you hear it? Can you hear us, Stephen?
Yeah, Steven and Jacob are here.
Awesome. So how long have you been in this house?
We moved in 2013.
Okay, wonderful. So you've been about 7 years then.
Yeah. This year we were able to redo the siding, which was a big deal for us.
That's wonderful. Well, it certainly looks very clean and neat. We like the appearance of not just the landscape, but the home as well. So congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
We appreciate you all helping keeping Ferndale beautiful. The next house, and this particular one, is our coneflower winner. We select a coneflower winner every July, and they are nominated from all over Ferndale. And this particular one is 441 Edgewood Place. It's a small lot, but it's a double lot. So actually the whole strip across the front of their house extends down the road just a bit. And it's very clean and neat and has wonderful representation of our city flower, the coneflower. So I'm not sure if Kurt Malin is here with us. Are you?
Looks like it.
He also wanted to give credit to someone that several of us are familiar with. Kat Listening was his mentor in helping design the landscape and all of that. So are you with us, Kurt?
Hello, yes, I am here.
Awesome. How long have you been at this house?
22 years this
Wow.
September.
Wow, Kurt. Were you born there?
No, I'm a bit older than that. Thank you. I was in my mid-20s when I bought it. So
Okay, wonderful. We were really impressed with the display of the coneflower, so thank you for doing that.
well, thank you. Yeah, Kat really helped me with that, and also one of the highlights of it is he helped reclaim the house. The property has a lot of fieldstone.
Mhm.
The original owners were, he was a retired Masons from what I understood. And there was a lighthouse that had been behind the garage, kind of dilapidated, and Kat really made it, made a great reuse of it as a display piece.
Oh, very good. Excellent. Anytime that we can recycle items in the landscape so that we're not adding more new stuff to it and putting the older things to good use, it is a good thing. So thank you so much, Kurt, for doing what you've done and for listening to Kat.
Yes. Well, thank you so much.
You're
really
welcome.
nice. Appreciate it.
The next winner is a commercial winner this month. We wanted to applaud Rosie O'Grady's for the wonderful work they've done in not only creating some lovely plantings in their back patio area, but also for their rearranging of the furniture to a more socially distancing pattern, which I think was wonderful. I don't know if anyone is here from Rosie's. If you are, if you wave so Kyle can see you. This photo of the planter boxes against the back wall there was taken a couple of weeks ago. So if they're doing as they've been instructed, which is to water every day, those potato vines will be quite glorious in about a month. So you'll really have to check them out. We also wanted to show everyone our new logo for the Ferndale Beautification Commission. We're very pleased with the way the logo turned out. We've got the Ferndale logo there underneath it. The design incorporates not only traditional homes, but more modern styled homes in the background. It has trees, which we're all very happy with in Ferndale, shrubbery that has flowers in it on either side. So we think that it really reflects the Beautification Commission in our fair city, and we hope that you agree. So we'll be using these on our signs and our letterhead and all from now forward.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, we had some excellent assistance from one of our newest council members in getting that logo designed. So thank you, Council Member Laura Mikulski, for all of your assistance in helping pull that together. Finally, we would like to announce that the August beautification nominations will be due by August the 4th. We've moved the date up simply because of now what we're having to do with all the Zoom meetings. We can't have meetings on top of meetings. So the Beautification Commission will be meeting a week earlier than we have in the past, which means now we have to move our nominations up a week as well. So follow us on our Facebook page, our Instagram page, get those nominations in so that we can recognize the people who are doing some wonderful things in our our city. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.
Excellent. Thank you, Robin, for the update, and congratulations to all the winners this month. We have had County Commissioner Helene Zach, and I just wanted to offer her time to give an update from the county briefly before we move on to the presentation. Good evening, Commissioner. Welcome.
Okay. Hello, everybody. It's so nice to be here. It took me a little bit of time to get in, but I appreciate it. Want to tell you there's lots going on in Oakland County, and I do want to remind all of our residents that there are tons of different COVID grant opportunities to help us get through this pandemic. And the best way to find these grant opportunities is to go to www.oakgov.com/COVID. And at the bottom of the page, there's something called grants. And if you push that grant button, you will see a multitude of different grant opportunities. There's an economic recovery grant for small businesses. This is the third round, and this is targeted toward businesses that have been closed longer, such as personal services, hair salons, gyms, and we have set aside money particularly for minority and women-owned businesses. There's actually $30 million in this fund. It's a grant, no payback. There are grant opportunities for veterans if people are having trouble paying their housing or mortgage or utility expenses. We've appropriated roughly about $8 million for that. There's additional services for veterans. There's job coaching. There's workforce development to help residents. We also are looking at we've done several initiatives. I hope that students will be able to go back to school. One of them is that we are hiring public health nurses that will be assigned to every school district to help students and staff and environment be as clean and responsive to COVID prevention as possible. We also are contracting with Beaumont Health System. They're going to offer a nurse on call hotline for all students in Oakland County from 5 to 8 in the morning. We also are doing lots of different election initiatives. We did, and I love your drive-by voting right now, but we did buy some high-speed counting machines to count ballots, and I hope that Ferndale is one of the communities taking advantage of that. We also, oh good. We also are going to be mailing people ballots with postage in the fall. That was another thing. We're trying to make it as easy and as accommodating and welcoming for people to vote. And we also have offered incentive pay so that we can make sure that we have enough poll workers. And I hope Arnie taking advantage of that we have enough poll workers, because we are worried about that. So there's a multitude of different things that we've been able to do. Also, I want to talk, we did have our budget presentation. I am the chair of finance, and there's been some misrepresentation out there. Oakland County is not millions of dollars in debt. We have a balanced 3-year budget presented, and I did start budget hearings last week. We're conducting them, and we'll vote on a budget by the end of September. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk to residents. And if anybody needs their county commissioner, Helene Zach, I'm available until the end of this year, December 31st, 2020. And you can best reach me on my cell, 248-506-1903, if you have any concerns. I'm here to serve you.
Thank you, Helene, for the update and being here tonight. Always keeping us informed.
Thanks.
Excellent. All right. Next on presentations this evening is the Community Affordability and Inclusive Housing Action Plan update. So I believe, who is leading this presentation this evening?
Through the chair, Economic Development Director Jordan Torty will lead that presentation.
Excellent.
Thank you, Joe, Mayor. Yes, absolutely. I'm ready to go ahead and dive into that. And as I hit the share screen button here and pull up some presentation slides, just to kind of set the tone for what folks on all ends of the Zoom meeting tonight are going to see, I'm going to set some context and reframe the issue in terms of why we're doing this and what we're up to, because it's been a while. COVID-19 really kind of slowed down the roll of this plan. It was our intent really for July to be the month where we'd be presenting the fully built out plan with all the action items and steps for council's consideration. But we wanted to make sure that as people were kind of unplugged from their normal ways of engaging, we wanted to create extra time and space for engagement. So what tonight is a couple things. We're going to be seeing LSA, the firm that we selected to work with back in 2019 to start this journey. They're going to go dive deep into the goals that they've developed. They're going to talk about some of the strategy context behind those and what you can expect in the final plan. They're going to give a preview of what those action items will look like. As I've mentioned in previous presentations, this plan will be structured very similar to the city's strategic plan, where you have a hierarchy of sort of goals, aspirations and elements you want to achieve, and then actions within that you'll pursue to achieve those goals. They're going to dive deep in that, and what we really want, in addition to putting that out there, this is sort of the last call, if you will, for public input before that final plan is assembled, packaged, and presented to council for their consideration. So this is sort of, this message is sort of out to everyone in the community that's engaged so far. We've been getting feedback from residents, homeowners, renters of all walks, and that's been awesome. And we want to continue to get that. And we want to let folks know that when this plan is, our goal is to bring this plan for the August 24th meeting. So August 17th would be the day that's submitted to the clerk's office. So August 16th is going to be the day to provide your input by. So August 16th, get us your comments, your thoughts, feels, ideas. And what we want to do is make sure we bake all of that stuff into the plan. So what I'm going to do, without further ado, is just kind of roll into some context slides. If I could just get some quick notes, nods from council. Can you see the green affordable housing slide? Perfect, thank you. Okay, I just want to make sure Murphy's Law has not hit. So without further ado, I'm going to slide through. Possibly. Perfect. So part of what we did is whenever you want to embark in an initiative, getting your definitions and your terms right is one of your most important first steps, because that is what informs all of the goals that you set, and it informs the metrics that you use to measure your progress against those goals. And it also is going to affect how you make recommendations to achieve those goals. So that's what the first task is that we had to do is, anecdotally, we've heard in the community for a while. We've seen a lot of the development that has come to town. We know that at City Hall, on City Council, and in the community, we know that this is an issue. So how do we prioritize it and how do we define it? So that was sort of the first sort of element of this. And so that's something that you're going to see tonight that LSA is going to talk about, what the focus group that put this together came up with in terms of definitions. And LSA is going to kind of talk about that focus group process and how that was put together. But I wanted to back up first and just talk about why we're here. So I alluded to this a little bit in my opening remarks. These 4 bullet points, and I won't read every word here, I'll let you know that all of this is on the city's website in our current project section where this project lives. We wrote this both as a presentation and as a report. So folks that weren't able to follow along at the meeting tonight can kind of read and see all the context. But these 4 points, that's why we're here. So input from the community. Like I said, we know this is an issue. We know it's a priority of current and past councils and city staff that Ferndale remains accessible to all. So talking about expanding housing access, preserving affordable housing. So we've seen with development in the past that the market's not going to do this on its own. So we have to intervene, and we have to figure out a way to make sure, as we're expanding housing opportunities, that we're also preserving the housing stock that we have and maintaining affordability in the stock that we have. And then, of course, obviously, our commitments to equity and anti-racism. So all of this stuff goes hand in hand. So this is part of walking that walk, is making sure that we're an accessible place to live and call home for folks of all walks of life. And so what is the problem? Just kind of framing this issue. I say we know this is an issue. So what is that issue? You know, the working class and middle class individuals who built this town and continue to make it thrive are less and less able to call it home. As costs rise and income stagnate, it's becoming an increasing problem. So that, in a nutshell, is what we're really looking to tackle through housing and cost of living here. Just to kind of put that in perspective, about 1 of every 4 Ferndale households is considered to be housing cost burden. So what I mean by that, this is a phrase that comes from affordable housing lingo. A lot of it leans on the federal government Housing and Urban Development Department. So in terms of how affordability is measured, that's considered paying in excess of 30% of your income on housing-related expenses. That's mortgage, rent, utilities, maintenance, etc. So this graphic here shows, it's 1 in 4 is paying more than 30% of their income as a household, which includes individuals and families, paying more than 30% of their income on housing-related expenses. So that's sort of a key flashpoint that we're aware of in our town that kind of quantifies the scale of the problem. And that number is growing. So why is this an issue now? So the housing stock in Ferndale is limited and aging. We have about 11,000 structures in town. 9,000 of them are single-family homes, a lot of them from the 20s and up. So that is an aging housing stock. You know, anybody with your sewer line, anybody that's still got a crock line out there, or you still got to snake your drains, and you have to deal with cracks and fissures in your line, everybody knows that there are elements of homes in this town that are aging. And the price of purchasing and renting, in addition, continues to increase further beyond that level, that threshold of affordability. As housing prices go up, all these different repairs that you have to do that have to factor into the purchase price. And then, as we know also recently, in recent years, for new buyers and owners alike, property tax uncapping creates a disincentive to purchase. That's something that brokers are not being as diligent in putting that information out there. It's not something that everyone is aware of as they come to buy a home. And so that's something that's a consideration. As houses go many years between sales, that's a piece of the equation. So, and then of course, the economic uncertainty posed by COVID-19. So it means we have to be holistic, we have to be focused on resiliency. So that's a little bit of a high level of why this is an issue now. Just a profile of, again, just sort of the economic picture of this. We're trying to put some data to the problem and to how we solve it. So if you think about the folks that this benefits and the folks who are in that affordability price range, 22% of resident jobs in our town, and you can see the sources at the bottom of the slide, 22% of our jobs in town are in food and hospitality and retail. And when you think of the wages for those jobs, the maximum affordable rent, I mentioned that 30% threshold. So for a renter, that's about $750 a month. For a homeowner, that's about a $200,000 sales price on a home. So that just kind of gives you an idea. Now, that's not hard and fast for everybody, but that's sort of when you start talking about these averages and thresholds, that just gives you a ballpark idea of the numbers that we're talking about and the prices that we're talking about. So, and just kind of looking at that in another way, you think of, I mentioned our housing stock aging. Another thing that's happening with our housing stock is it's changing. So you can see what those two little houses on the right mean. That 22% reduction, that means rental opportunities at that price range have shrunk since these numbers, since 2017, they've shrunk by 22%. And the number of homes in the sales price of 200 or less has shrunk by 4%. And so LSA is going to talk a little bit more about that. Part of one of the things they did for us was a housing market analysis, which is also on that project page. That was, if for folks that have been following this along since the start, that was one of the first things they did for us at RIP when we launched this project. So that's on the project page, and folks can dive into that. But that's part of the context here. So just another thing, and if I'm starting to sound like a broken record, that's semi-intentional, because it's worth repeating that with all the opportunities that have come to Ferndale, this is a pivotal moment in our community's history. We've seen in projects that without intervention by public institutions, the market alone will not create affordable housing. You see what's happening in peer cities like Detroit, even though I know their scale is much larger. It takes very intentional, significant intervention to make affordable housing happen, because it does not financially pencil out on its own. So that's a big piece of why we're pushing this, and why you'll see when LSA goes into the goals and the methodology, a lot of that is sort of colored thematically, if you will, around the idea that it's going to take intervention from local government, also working with county, state, and federal opportunities. So it's not us by ourselves on an island, but a lot of this is about we need to intervene if we want to see this outcome. And so we have choices in terms of how we do so. So that's what LSA is going to help us walk through. And so I mentioned at the start of this that defining your terms is really important. Now, LSA is going to go into how we arrived at these definitions through the advisory group, but the definition that they came up with. So what is affordable inclusive housing? For us, that's options throughout the city for people from all walks of life, backgrounds, and income levels. So what do we mean by that? So when we say that, we mean for literally everyone, for people from all walks of life, all backgrounds, all income levels. We say that, we mean people of all ages, races, ethnicities, abilities, sexual orientations, and gender expressions. This is something that is a hallmark of Ferndale, what's made us special, what's made us a wonderful place. That is something that is part and parcel to being a driving force of this initiative. So that's just starting from off the cup there. That's an important focal point for who we're trying to serve with this. And so those in greatest need of support. So obviously, you know, there are folks that are hit by this issue differently across that spectrum of everyone. And so we're cognizant of that. So working professionals, students, senior citizens, young families, and people making their new start. So a lot of, and one common thread among these, and it's not the only, but these are folks that have a lot of circumstances that affect their monthly budgets. They're on fixed incomes, and they have heavy costs. So that's something that, especially if you're in that new start category, for example, you might have past costs and fixed costs from your old start that you're carrying over. So these are folks that don't have a lot of flexibility in their personal finances. And so this issue hits especially hard because costs just keep marching upward. So that's something that we're very focused on as well. So the solutions that we're going to propose and we develop and working through council and prioritizing, it's all going to be focused on obviously making us and remain inclusive for everyone, but with a special focus on these folks that are in that particularly acute vulnerability for this issue. And so LSA had helped us kind of paint a picture of you know, some scenarios, some vignettes they call them, just kind of paint a picture of just snapshots of different types of people and how housing is connected to them. So millennials, you know, young adults are driving population growth in downtown, in Ferndale, not just downtown, but throughout the city. Millennials wanting to buy their first homes are finding limited lower priced options. So think back to that graphic I showed you. So in this slide here, and you'll see in the rest of the vignettes I'm going to show you briefly, this is kind of the theme. What is the issue and what can we do? And so it's very much focused on responding to what's in the environment and how we can actually address it effectively given our unique abilities, opportunities, and limitations as a local government. So what can we do for millennials? So things like down payment assistance, looking at expanding options. So that looks at, zoning for development of townhouses, fourplexes, and other small multifamily to provide price points for folks in that situation. And a caveat that's needs to be sort of explicitly pointed out there is that change comes with balance. So you don't fix something that isn't broken. You don't go full dial it up to 100 in one direction to get away from your current situation. So there's a balancing act there that goes. I mentioned 9,000 single family structures. That doesn't mean we're going to turn 9,000 structures into 9,000 townhomes. So I just want to be clear that this is a balancing act and it takes intentionality. But the point is, part of the mix is expanding housing options. We've talked about things in the past like missing middle. So all of that is done with intentionality, with community engagement, and determining what that balance is together. So that's just an important piece of that. So baby boomers in housing. So now obviously these are generations that we all sort of know and have an affinity with. I want to make sure that folks know that this is not an exclusive list of everyone that we're focused on in housing in Ferndale, but these are just sort of relatable examples, if you will. So baby boomers, but to that point, these groups do have some trends that are worthy of note. So about 1 in 5 Ferndale residents, for example, are in their 50s and early 60s. A vast majority of older adults want to age in place. What can we do about that? So we can provide grants to make homes accessible. That includes things for like minor home repair. That includes, ADA accessibility enhancements. Changing zoning to allow more accessory apartments. One phenomenon that is happening in this market is parents are going to live with their children. And so are there opportunities where they can have the in-law suite, if you will? So creating opportunities for that. Fund programs that combine housing and services to help older adults of all incomes age in place. You don't have to go to an assisted living facility if those assistance programs can be brought to your house. So I want to emphasize that one because, and I'll say, we'll show you, not everything is about real estate. Obviously, that's a part of this, but it's also about cost of living and all the things that you need to live successfully wherever you do choose to live and however you choose to live. Young workers in housing in Ferndale. So there's nearly 900 workers in Ferndale in that accommodation and food services sector. And I believe that's what's called a NAICS code. So these industry codes that the census uses. So that's where that phrase comes from. Ferndale has a higher share of those workers that bike or walk to work than do other nearby communities. And that's a little bit of water taking the shape of its container. We've invested in a lot of infrastructure in that sort of option of living over the past several years. So it would stand to reason that we have more of those folks using it. Young workers do have a difficult time finding affordable housing in Ferndale. Workers and renters often double and triple up in order to afford these costs. So that's something that we're cognizant of. We know it's a challenge. So what can we do about it? So again, maybe sounding like a broken record, incentivizing more affordable options through inclusionary housing, working with employers to offer employer-assisted housing programs, and then create zoning to incentive housing over retail. So we focused a lot on exciting the street. That's a common planning term of creating vibrancy in our street fronts, not having dead space. There's opportunities to maybe talk about incorporating housing into that. So again, that's part of that balancing act. So fairness and equality. So again, and I mentioned the city's commitments to equity and anti-racism. So this is a huge deal in terms of housing because you're also, frankly, addressing a lot of past legacies of past housing policies that did not have fairness and equity or equality in mind, or equity for that matter. So you're kind of doing some cleanup, if you will. The prioritization of affordable and inclusive housing is about a fundamental issue of fairness and equity. And that's for the people who are already here and the people who are yet to come here. So that's important. It's not either or. This is all of the above. But that underlying philosophy that made Ferndale what it is, the ability to come as you are, build a life for yourself in a place that values you, and allow you to make your mark, that's something that's special and it's worth preserving. And so that's also part of this. So with that, what I'd like to do is I'd like to pause for questions, but just to kind of heads up, my next motion will be to kick it to LSA, who's going to go into this plan and really show how it's going to help us lay out these strategies with measurable outcomes, provide a framework for, like the strategic plan, stuff we can do in the immediate now, the near term, and long-term implementation, and have definitions on those terms. What does that mean? 1 year, 2 years, 3 years? As well as building in a process for reflection, measurement, and adaptation. So it's not like we do this plan and then that's it. We just churn out for however many years. There's a built-in process for taking a breath, looking around, and making sure that we're doing the right things given the moment. So with that, I do want to quickly pause. I apologize. I had one more slide. Just a timeline. Before I kick to LSA, there's our milestones right in front of you. You can see in August, our intent is to basically bring this to council, and if council so desires, to establish this plan as our official framework, which would feed into the council's strategic planning exercise, where from that list, you'll identify conceivably a number of those items in the plan to prioritize to start with, and then an implementation and budget plan proposal after the council has set its priorities. You'll see, like Joe had mentioned, in sort of our COVID response activities, a budget amendment will come through that will lay out how we're going to fund some of the things we start with. And then for a year, we're going to pound out some of these activities to the best of our ability, and we're going to make sure that we revisit and we say, where have we gotten and what's next? So with that, I'd like to pause for questions, and if there are any at this time, or if you'd like to go straight into LSA's presentation, at the pleasure of the mayor or council.
I think keep moving ahead. I look forward to the LSA presentation. Would you like us to ask council to ask questions along the way, or hold till the end?
I think you're more than welcome to do so. If Kyle, if you want to help us moderate and make sure as members of council want to interject, just to help us make sure that goes technically smoothly, I'd appreciate it. But right now, what I'm going to do is stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to invite Ryan and David of LSA, who should be panelists now and should be able to unmute themselves, to go ahead and do so and take over.
Good evening, welcome, thank you. Glad we're at the end, near the end.
David, you're good to go. You're unmuted, and Ryan, so are you. The floor is yours.
Thanks, guys. Just working on getting the PowerPoint loaded here. Bear with me, sorry about that.
We have matching blazers.
The PowerPoint version isn't showing up, so I'm going to try the Adobe version. Here we go. All right, can everybody see that? Can everyone hear me?
Yep, you're good to go.
Okay, great. Sorry for the delay. Thanks, Jordan, for that introduction, and Madam Mayor and members of council. It's great to see you all again. I hope everyone's feeling well and staying safe. For the record, my name is Ryan Price with LSA Planning, and we're excited to have this discussion with you tonight, on a topic that's so critical to the city, and it's important to the residents, that came out loud and clear throughout this process with the community on how important housing is in Ferndale. Tonight, I'm joined by my colleague, David Christille, who helped design some of the strategies that we'll be talking through with you all tonight. David has decades of experience in creating and implementing housing policies all over the country, and most recently served as Director of Housing in Arlington County, Virginia, which is right across the Potomac from DC. He also spent many years in the Midwest working as a planner in Chicago. David, do you want to add anything? Did I miss something?
I don't think so, but I'm sending greetings from the nation's capital in Washington, D.C. right now. Glad to be here.
So the focus really of tonight is digging into the strategies and the recommendations that we've been working on. Most of the presentation will be about those. What the strategies are, why they're important to inclusive housing in Ferndale. Because the strategies really are the heart of the plan, and they're the roadmap, if you will, for moving forward. So David will walk us through those recommendations, and we hope to leave ample time, for discussion of the strategies. If anyone has a question, in the middle as we're walking through those, feel free to chime in, and we'll take your questions. Before that, though, I'm going to quickly go through just an update on the planning activities that we've been going through, and highlight some of the revisions to the goals and the focus areas that came out of the dialogue that we've been having with the community, and the feedback from the advisory group and from the community meeting that was held back in February. So this is a snapshot of the planning activities thus far. And since the last time that we met back in December, we presented an update to council. We've had several advisory group meetings since then, and also a larger community event. And these events really allowed for a robust dialogue on housing in Ferndale, and specifically the priorities and kind of the focus areas of the residents. And so we took that feedback and we made some changes and refinements to the goals, which really help and inform and kind of feed into the types of strategies and really the sequencing of implementation, which David will touch on here shortly. As for the upcoming steps, Jordan kind of alluded to this, but we'll be bringing the final inclusive housing plan to you all for consideration at the end of August, and following one final round of community feedback, which is basically from now until the middle of August. And important to keep in mind, that final planning document is also going to include not only kind of the strategies, recommendations, which we're going to dive into tonight, but it's also going to provide, context about the community involvement, kind of the feedback that we received along the way, the goals and priorities of the community as expressed in that feedback. But it's also going to have a monitoring plan and a series of metrics that can be used to kind of track the progress of the plan and the different elements of the plan over time. And as Jordan mentioned, that this is really something that can be changed. It's something that you'll be monitoring, on a regular basis, but that allows for an opportunity for reflection and for tweaking as necessary, because these plans are living documents, and it's important to keep them relevant, and a good way to do that is to track the progress. So that will be part of that document as well. As I mentioned, we got a lot of good feedback from the advisory group, which met on a regular basis throughout this process, and then also from a community event that was held back in February. And it was a cold and snowy night there in Ferndale, but that didn't keep people from coming to talk about housing. It was a great turnout and a lively discussion. And so some of the key themes that we got out of that event were really to consolidate some of the goal areas. There were some that had some overlaps and some redundancies. And so we really kind of focused and refined the goals and the focus areas. And in doing so, it really honed in on the priorities, what people felt most strongly about. And that came out through the discussions. It came out through the feedback exercises that we had at the event. So based on that feedback, like I said, we revised the goals. You saw an initial set of goals the council did back in December. Since that time, using the feedback from these events, we revised the goals and the focus areas. So here they are. There's 6 of them. And like I said, these really shape the content and the strategies and recommendations. The 6 are seniors, economically vulnerable, environmental sustainability, diversity of the housing stock, home ownership, and renters. So now David's going to walk us through the strategies and recommendations and sort of how those were how those tie back to the goals and the focus areas. David?
Thank you, Ryan. So we're recommending these 8 strategies as a package because for 4 main reasons. They're interconnected and largely consist of resources that Ferndale controls. They're most effective in helping Ferndale meet its goals and objectives that are listed there. They build a foundation for both short-term and long-term successes. We recommend staging them over a period of time to accommodate your ability to implement them, again, over this period of time. They're consistent with best practices, both locally and nationally, and they come with peer support from colleagues across the state. You've got a talented staff. I mean, it's been a pleasure working with your staff. I've been here for just a few months, and you've got colleagues across the state that are also in talking through, these different strategies. They're willing to help as you begin implementing them. Next slide. The first recommendation is voluntary inclusionary zoning. Essentially, it's using your development rights density to create homes for all kinds of people. About 43% of renter households are cost burdened in Ferndale. Voluntary inclusionary zoning incentivizes the production of mixed income homes. It's largely market driven. You get affordable homes when additional market rate housing is permitted through bonus density. Transportation, industrial, commercial corridors, employment corridors are really the best locations for the additional density. And we recommend modifying Ferndale's current program as a good place to start. The next recommendation, number 2, is establishing a local housing trust fund, essentially using Ferndale's financial resources to create homes for people being priced out. Homes supported by a trust fund should help people who are cost burdened. And again, this is about 1 out of every 4 households. Housing Trust Fund could also help seniors in Ferndale who are increasing in the coming years as baby boomers age. The fund could also help young families purchase a home in Ferndale. Trust funds are flexible. The city can decide how and when funds are used, whether to provide gap financing for housing production, for home repairs, or for down payment assistance. Leveraging other funds is another key benefit to trust funds. So if you have $1 of Ferndale funds, you should leverage at least an additional $3, $4, $5 of other funds that go with that fund. That's an important piece to start from. And I think as a starting point, we recommend seeding this fund with $250,000 as a start.
I had a follow-up question here about cities of our size. Is this a common tool to use for helping with the housing tactics or the strategies that you're recommending? I'm familiar with trust funds and things like that, but is this just a common tool for cities of our size?
I'd say it's used by city of your size, but I think and I guess, Ryan and I talked about this question. It's really putting, in some ways it's putting your money where your objectives are. And so I think it's perhaps reframing it is not so much what do other cities have your size, but it's scaling it to an appropriate level for towns your size. And so I think the $250,000 represents about 1% of the tax, your general fund, if I'm kind of looking to the city manager for that. So I think the $250,000 is we think it's a modest amount. I think the important point about the trust fund is it really is you're putting your money where your values are. And in my experience in Arlington and I think in other places, it's really one of the main local tools you have that can bring other funds to the table. And we've talked to developers, the people from the Community Housing Network, and it's really, we think it's a valuable tool. And again, it's in the case of what you've got not only the production you're interested in, but you're also interested in repairs. You're also interested in helping first-time home buyers. And I know the city of Ann Arbor has a trust fund that they can use that for multiple purposes.
I would maybe I would add something to that, David. That we have worked with communities that about the same size as Ferndale, maybe a little bit bigger, that have had trust funds that started trust funds. And again, it's really about the scale of this trust fund. So while a larger city may put in several $1 million a year, just kind of scaling that to Ferndale. But really the benefit here is the flexibility that's provided. It's not only for housing production, but it also can be used for smaller projects, for preservation projects, for renovation projects. And so it's it might seem like kind of a big ticket item, but I think over time, as you find different ways to kind of build it up over time, not necessarily directly from the city coffers, but from development contributions, there's a lot of range of funding sources that it really gives you a tool and a mechanism to allocate funds towards housing initiatives.
Thank you. My question comes at it more as the how do we operationalize that and what capacity we have to establish it, not so much against the purpose or intent.
Right.
And so those are concerns and issues that I'll bring up when we talk about our strategic priorities and all of that. But thank you for going deeper into that a little bit for me.
Of course.
Okay.
So the third recommendation is public land, and it's really making city-owned land available for mixed-income housing. It's land you can control, can create housing, create homes for all kinds of people, including those being priced out and those who work in Ferndale and want to live here. I think between 2012 and 2017, there were about almost 750 new homes created, rental homes, where the rents exceeded $1,000, and in some cases above $1,250. During the same period, the number of homes renting below $1,000 has declined by 14%. And I think the earlier figure was for homes below $750, the decline was even sharper. 1 out of every 3 households have annual incomes of levels that rents above $1,000 are unaffordable. Land is often one of the largest costs to develop homes, so public land can be sold at a reduced cost, provided at no cost or through a long-term 99-year ground lease. Ferndale would partner with developers to build mixed-income homes on strategic land sites. In exchange for the reduced cost of land, a developer would provide an agreed-upon number of homes, either rental or ownership.
This is Councilman Polika. You just mentioned that between 2012 and 2017 there were, and I missed that number, 1,000 new.
It was about 750, 730 is the number we had.
Okay, but just for clarification, those weren't on public-owned land. Those were all private development. I just want people to be aware that none of those developments occurred on publicly owned land.
Okay. Is there a follow-up question or?
Nope. I just wanted to make sure that that was a clarification.
Sure.
I think just to add a little context, I think that we included that information in this just to sort of paint the picture that there's a lot of new housing coming online, but in many cases it's not in a range that's affordable to a large percentage of the population there. And so public land is one strategy that can help to bring additional units online over time that would be at an affordable level.
Yeah, and actually I need to clarify myself because I said public-owned land, city-owned land, because there were 2 major properties that were owned by the school district that the city had no control over, where there was private development was done, but that was without the control of the city.
And I just want to provide for context to people watching is that the real estate market really didn't start taking off until 2016. There was no development during the Great Recession, pretty much for any housing. And then the spigot just sort of turned on. And the inclusive housing policy we passed in 2017 was a strategy to put in place to get the private developers to actually consider affordable housing and get them to do it. And we knew we needed to do more, which is why we hired you all to come up with the plan, right? But definitely the policy needs updating to really address what's happening, I think, federally. There's been lots of changes federally since you started this study. And the pandemic certainly is putting a deeper shine onto the housing crisis nationally that is definitely appearing in Ferndale at the local level.
So the next strategy, this is home rehabilitation. So preserving existing affordability through home rehabilitation. So home repair program helps people remain in Ferndale. It makes their homes safer, more accessible, more energy efficient, and allows them to age in place. Most of the housing stock, and I think I saw the presentation earlier, is most of the homes are more than 60 years old. Some of the older homes are well maintained and some are not. Homes need repair as they age. Common repairs include new roofs, windows, doors. Sometimes the repairs are too expensive for folks on fixed incomes and low-income folks. And so that's what the home repair programs are for. They provide funding and technical assistance to help owners sustainably remain in their homes. Assistance usually provided through no interest or low interest loans or grants. Home repair programs are typically run by local governments or agencies and nonprofit organizations. So we're recommending that Ferndale focus its efforts on organizing available resources. There's resources at Oakland County, as well as other sources, DTE Energy and the state of Michigan. Next. Modifications of single-family zones. This will facilitate more housing diversity through code changes. It expands housing choice for people looking to buy or rent in Ferndale. The majority of Ferndale's land, I think is noted, is about 80% is zoned for single-family use, a potentially significant resource for missing middle homes. Ferndale is built out, so infill opportunities will be critical to meeting the need for more homes. It meets the need and desire to create home ownership for moderate income renters and already living and working in Ferndale, and it could meet the need for homes priced below $200,000. We recommend a considerable community engagement as staff defines the geography and defines the ordinance modifications and then develops implementation options. Next. Provide more resources for first-time home buyers. This makes home ownership more equitable by linking underserved and underrepresented people to resources, both financial and services, to help them purchase a home in Ferndale. Current home ownership programs are focused on helping households typically up to about $65,000 per year. Families with lower incomes have to compete with households moving to Ferndale with incomes exceeding $100,000. And finally, approximately 40% of the existing homes priced under $200,000 offer opportunity for first-time home buyers. Loans, grants, and technical assistance are provided by governmental agencies and nonprofit organizations. And like the Housing Rehabilitation Program, Home Repair Program, we recommend Ferndale work with Oakland County and a network of organizations, primarily Community Housing Network and Venture Inc., to get its residents and employees to resources as a starting place. Next. So number 7 is adaptive reuse, exploring the adaptive reuse of commercial industrial buildings and areas. This creates more housing options for a wider range of Ferndale residents, as well as people who work in Ferndale and want to live here. It creates homes where there are none, either renter or ownership. And the 2017 master plan and the market study that was with that identified 2 main areas and 6 potential sites. And I think if I remember correctly, there was a potential for about 1,000 homes in those areas. A portion of these homes could serve the elderly and disabled, as well as low and moderate income households. The effectiveness of strategy is based on the ability to find willing and able partners and owners and developers. Creating affordable homes and adaptive reuse developments require a full range of housing resources, land and resources, as well as participation of organizations like the Downtown Development Authority, Oakland County, and the state. We recommend identifying potential sites and working with owners and other stakeholders to implement this strategy. Next. Finally, the last one is utilizing the payment in lieu of taxes to support rental housing affordability. Choosing Ferndale's tax system can create homes for people being priced out of Ferndale. It's used to help incentivize affordable rental housing and therefore help address the needs of the most vulnerable and low-income residents. They're negotiated on a deal-by-deal basis and aligned with the financing policies. The pilot should be linked to other tools that produce affordable rental homes, and the priority should be given to nonprofit developers or for-profit developers that use other tools, including a trust fund, other federal and state resources, including the low-income housing tax credit program. Ferndale has the authority and has negotiated pilots in the past, so this provides a good foundation for creating more homes. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Ryan.
Thanks, David. So before we kind of get into the discussion period, just to highlight some of the next steps that we'll be working on here in the coming weeks. The final round of feedback from the public and the broader community on the strategies and on the recommendations. You'll be gathering that feedback from now through middle of August and making adjustments as necessary to the plan. Again, the finalized plan, we'll have it ready and posted in Legistar in middle of August, and then we'll bring it to the council for consideration at the end of August on the 24th. So with that, we're happy to take any questions about the strategies or the plan more broadly.
If I may, through the chair, I noticed that that it keeps kind of coming up that's saying that the community feedback runs between now and the middle of August. How would the community submit that feedback? Because I didn't see anything about a meeting date. So how would they submit that?
Through the chair, if I may, I could take that one, Mayor Pro Tem. What we're going to do is we have the project page set up, and originally we were going, so first off, you could send comments in at any time. We have discussed, and one of the things that we wanted to do following tonight was discussing the feasibility. We're going to be looking at the budget of the project to make sure we have funds remaining, but what we'd like to do is put together another Zoom conversation, even if it's just an informal Q&A, but we want to talk with the project team about feasibility of that. But at a bare minimum, we have the accessibility of Adam and myself and the project team, Ryan and David, to take in ideas, to do back and forth. Just recognizing that, yes, we want to have additional input. We also want to make sure we stay in budget on the project, and we also want to just acknowledge that we have collected a lot of feedback over the past year. So it's kind of, again, all of the above, but please stay tuned on the Zoom opportunity. We're going to discuss that with the project team, and if we're able to pull that off, it is our intent to do so.
So if I might understand then, there are two communities to submit ideas to you and to Adam by way of email for now?
Or absolutely. Adam's email is there on the screen. It's probably easiest. Just for folks at home looking at that, and also on the project page, that's all repeated. So if you remember nothing else, current projects on ferndalemi.gov, you click that button, you'll see this project in the big square that shows up, and all that contact information is there, but you can also jot down Adam's email right there, and we respond to every comment that comes in, and our goal is to fold in as much as possible.
Thank you.
I have a quick question. Hey, Jordan, when the presentation referenced unprogrammed city-owned land, what exactly were you referencing? Does that include parks?
Absolutely not. No, no, through the chair, no. But there are a couple random parcels that we've achieved and accrued over time. Just from my own perspective as one of your staff, I got here about 4 years ago. Prior to my arrival, there were a lot of sort of random single-family lots that were sold off. The Troy lot is an example of one property that was converted to development, but that's a whole separate discussion. I mean, from LSA's perspective in this plan, it conceives of the theory of doing so. Another piece that's baked into that item is this community having a conversation about how it wants to treat those city-owned parcels. Right now, the city's inventory of parcels that we don't use is sort of like, for example, there's a lot over on Wanda where the railroad property sort of dead ends. We have random, unbuildable lots throughout town. So some of these would not apply, but there is a conversation to be had about how the city wants to look at some of its properties. We had, obviously we did not go for it, but there was the Baker opportunity. So that was an example of that was somebody who had come to us and solicited input, and we decided not to go with it. But that's just something all LSA is laying out is the theory of, hey, it's something if you want to take a look at it, this is how it's been done and this is how you could do it. It's options for us. But
sure. I like the theory of it. I'm just worried that if we try to implement the theory of it, that we don't have available parcels that we can potentially use to implement that theory.
Right, absolutely. I think one of the things that we'd like to do as part of the rollout of this plan is to kind of lay that out there and show what is the inventory, what are the options, and sort of giving council ammo to at least start that conversation. And that might not be something, maybe that's something that, you know, depending on how you all look at it, maybe that's something we start with, maybe that's something we build toward. But we're going to give you as much information as possible, including an inventory of properties to look at and make that decision, at least to start the convo. That's our intent anyway. And we can course correct if it would be desired.
Jordan, if I could add to that real quickly. So the way that we kind of structured the implementation piece you can see on this slide here is really that identifying and kind of deciding what the public land would be allocated for, you know, long term is really in that 3.2 step, you know, which is really you're evaluating the viability of it. So if it's needed for a different use than housing, you know, that would come out of that dialogue and that process with the community, you know, long before the actual site selection for housing. So that's definitely an important consideration that would be looked at.
Through the chair, if I may, I think I would have, I know we're still trying to determine what those pieces of land would look like, but I think I would have liked to have seen or gotten an idea of what some of those land options are in the city of Ferndale. So maybe as we go through the next round, maybe we can have some information as to some examples of what would be viable land options here in Ferndale.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea, and I need to conceptualize what we have too. But I do want to recommend, let you all know that this is the plan and the strategies, not the do. And I think part of the do is diving into that when we're ready to explore that. So if it's easy to get some properties in place for council to have a better understanding of what that strategy could look like, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, but diving into the deeper details, I'd like to slate that for once we start prioritizing the plan, which council will do as part of our strategy session in September.
And Mayor, if I may, and I know Ryan, it looked like you wanted to add to that as well, but I just wanted to give you a heads up that as part of the existing strategic plan that will sort of close as this council goes into its session in September, one of the items that we owe council is a property inventory and a policy, a proposed one anyway, for managing the city's inventory, whether we hold, convey, or add to our property inventory, and possible reasons why we would do that, how community engagement would go. That's something that really grew and evolved out of the Baker experience. That was something we knew we wanted to beef up. And how do we better involve the public? How do we have more of a sort of easy to understand, transparent, and consistent framework for all of this? So we intend to, that's going under legal review right now, and we intend to provide that to you ahead of the strategic planning process for your consideration. So we intend to give you that framework and those tools so that you can kind of have that eyes wide open in the context of this recommendation.
Okay. Thank you.
This is Councilman Polika. First, I want to thank everyone who participated in the meetings, and in particular all the citizens of Ferndale who engaged with the committee providing feedback. This was a monumental task, and I'm sure there were moments when residents felt like this might have been pointless or that this was just too complex an issue to try to solve. And while we haven't solved the problem, we're developing a roadmap to help us lead us to a more equitable community. The materials that were created are in depth and detailed, and while I don't have any questions, I do have a concern, and it was actually raised because of a potential project on Withington that was brought to the attention of the Planning Commission a few weeks ago. I agree that we need to revisit our zoning and allow for opportunity for more dense housing opportunities, and we'll have that opportunity next year when we begin working on our 5-year master plan. However, we will need to be mindful that we don't implement zoning that will alienate and aggravate the residents surrounding these density developments. We're looking at a possible 5-story, 5-unit apartment building being constructed on a single home lot surrounded by 1.5-story single-family homes. We could be looking at possibly a half dozen or more residents that could move if this project happens, because they're going to put up their house for sale, creating new turnover in housing and further exacerbate the problem of high-priced homes available to moderate income households. I know that I wouldn't be happy if a 45-foot building was planned on being built next to my house or behind it or in front of my home, and that's a real possibility because I live in a R3 zone, the same as where this proposed project would be built. So we have to be careful we don't ostracize the people who live in these neighborhoods. We might rezone with denser zoning limits. Because we might actually exacerbate the problem and a lack of affordable housing if 5 homes are sold at above market value so that 5-unit affordable apartment building could be constructed. That's really all I have to share.
I think that's, and I appreciate that. And I think that's at least the last point we made about that particular recommendation is that you're going to have, we're recommending a pretty, extensive community engagement process around that because it's, and again, this is, I'll speak from my experience in Arlington, Virginia, which is, it's a little bit different, but it's similar in the sense that it has it has the metro lines and it has high density housing along the, you got the map up here, and then it's surrounded by largely single family homes. And so I think, in terms of getting into this missing middle conversation, I think, it took us a long time to just get to the point where we could talk about it, but I think it's a strategy worth looking at. And I think, you're raising the caution that, if you decide to go forward with this particular strategy, it's really being very methodical and thoughtful about engaging and talking to residents and what does this mean and helping them understand, well, here, sort of starting with what kind of homes are we trying to create, and is this a tool that would help create those kinds of homes?
Yeah, I agree. I think we really need to focus on the interim. We have this idea of, we want Ferndale to be this nice, dense community, but, I think we have to be careful that we're not, building 5-story homes next to 1.5-story houses. Maybe a 2 to 2.5 or 3-story home, or apartment complex that might span over 2 or 3 lots instead of something that's massive. So, but I think this is the amount of information that you've provided is amazing and very, very informative, and I really, really appreciate all the work that the residents and of course you put into the project. So thank you.
I had some questions about AMI, and it was particularly area median income and targeting homes. It's more specific from the plan, but it was about that the city needed to have more flexibility on the mix of AMI targets on page 15, and sort of more flexibility on the mix of AMI targets so they can align with various funding sources that are often leveraged in mixed income housing. And so we keep trying to encourage developers to do a range of affordable units, and so as part of their market rate units for the development deal. And I was wondering how the flip side is that allow for more flexibility. The way that I looked at it is, how are we being inflexible? And so I'm not sure if that was the right way to do the inverse, but that's how I interpreted that question, and I was wondering if you can expand on that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And David, feel free to chime in if you want to talk about some of the federal parameters that come into play. But when we were looking at the existing inclusive housing policy and kind of comparing it to what other jurisdictions around the country are doing, one thing that really stood out was, yes, the policy is aimed at you're reaching the entire range of the income spectrum, but it's fairly prescriptive. And so a lot of places, instead of saying, X percentage has to be at this AMI, X percentage has to be at this AMI, it's more of the units that are affordable need to be in this range of affordability. And what that does is it allows, each development deal is going to be unique in, both its, the physical aspects of it, but also kind of the funding stacks and the operating revenues. And so kind of just opening it up so that it's more of a range or goalposts instead of buckets, I think it would be more appealing to a lot of developers. I know some of the federal programs, like LIHTC funding and such, have specific AMI ranges that make projects more competitive if the unit counts are hitting those AMI ranges. So I think just opening up those the ranges more is kind of what we were suggesting.
Okay, I hear that. So it offers a developer more opportunities to bring in more incentive funding to actually make their financials work on their project.
Yeah, exactly. It provides more flexibility so that their unique funding stacks, their sources that have their own different requirements on AMI ranges, those can be met while still satisfying the city policy.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions from council or comments?
I had a quick question.
Sure.
During the Great Recession, we saw declines in SEV and taxable value for the first time ever in a recessionary period. We're probably going to go into that again. And I was wondering if any of this considers the impact of COVID and the ongoing unemployment and economic declines that we're expecting, and the potential impact to the cost of your average, single family home within Ferndale. Was that clear?
I think so.
Are we? Yeah.
Go ahead.
Another way to say it is, are we going to see a decline in housing value again? Is that right, Laura?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, I will say that if anything, that I think the current situation, and I think we alluded to this earlier, it really puts more of a focus on housing, because particularly affordable housing and inclusive housing. So I think that the strategies, while they were developed sort of maybe a little bit before the pandemic and during the pandemic, they're universal and they're going to apply kind of in any economic climate. What's really going to vary, though, is kind of the rate of implementation. And so we've seen in housing markets across the country, particularly in high-cost areas, there's a historically low inventory of homes that are available for sale. And so, while we're seeing sales decline in markets, in May or April and May, some of that pent-up demand is coming back in June. While the demand is going up and down, the prices, though, in the market have been consistently growing, and that's because of the short supply that's available. So, in the long term, it's hard to say, but based on what we're seeing so far out of the gate from the pandemic, the home prices haven't really been impacted too substantially. If anything, they've been rising.
I think to add one more point, when we went through a couple of recessions in Northern Virginia, the irony was that the market rate housing stopped, but because we had the resources, the county, Arlington County had the financial resources and its trust fund, we were able to get, I think 1 year during the recession, we got 2 tax credit deals done, which is, essentially the state has a similar program where you've got tax credits that are allocated, and in a recession, it's usually the affordable housing is the one kind of business that if it's got resources, if you've got local funds and you've got access to tax credits or low-income housing tax credits, you can actually create housing in those situations. So it's a little counterintuitive Because I think the flip side or the other side of that is on the demand side is, like you say, what happens to people's incomes during these times. But I think it's an opportunity to kind of create more homes that are more affordable during this downtime or a downtime.
Through the chair, I want to chime in on this particular aspect, and then there was another thing I wanted to bring up. I too am concerned about what the housing market is going to look like over the next several years, because I think what we saw coming out of the last recession was that the recovery period, I think, seemed to have a greater disparity in who recovered and how quickly they recovered, and how that impacted increased rent all over the city, because a lot of homeowners flipped to rentals through investments and so forth. So I think the possibility of a looming housing crisis or crash makes it even more important that we focus on this issue. But another total non sequitur recommendation or comment that I'll make is that in the home rehabilitation section, David, I think I heard you say this verbally, but in the written report, I'd like to see some greater emphasis on this being a particular tool for not necessarily older adults, but people in our community who need accessibility modifications to their homes due to disabilities. I think that the inclusive policy, I think our original intent was to include accessibility for those with disabilities as well. So I would just like to see a little greater emphasis in the print on that.
No, that's a good point, because I think you're right. That's again, it's this issue during this downturn of, again, you've got these resources for home ownership, for repair, and again, making sure that those resources are going to folks that are most vulnerable, in those particular situations, whether it's barrier access or there's all sorts of there's all sorts of disabilities that again need to be addressed through a repair program, can be addressed through a repair program. Right?
Yeah, we could definitely add some language, beef up the language in that section, be a little bit more explicit about the residents and the population that would be benefited by the strategy. It's a great observation.
Excellent comment. Any other comments from council? Well, I personally am really thankful as well that our staff and LSA have put so much thought in this and making sure that it was a community-driven housing plan, which is what we always strive for in Ferndale. But these are some big policy changes as well as new programs and services that the city council really need to prioritize and think over mindfully, thoughtfully, and how we're going to do that going forward. Because these are some relatively big changes for operationalizing these services. I know we're up for the task, and we are always very good at implementing our plans in Ferndale over time. And I look forward to the final version for council adoption in August. And again, I think I'm looking for staff recommendations going into our for near term and planting seeds for long term that we need to start working on as part of prioritizing with the strategic planning process in September. So Joe, if you can make that happen as well, but I know you're already on it. With that, I think Ferndale has always said we want to keep Ferndale, keep Ferndale, normal, which is our hashtag for being quirky. And a part of that is making sure there's housing for everybody can stay here, because people make our community, and people make our community quirky in a way that we love. And so a lot of quirky people are having a hard time staying and living here. So that's what we need to be focusing on going forward. So thank you for your presentation tonight, and thank you, Jordan, for walking us through this. And thank you, LSA.
Thank you, guys, and please reach out, to Adam or myself if you have any thoughts or feedback, between now and August. We're always available if you need clarification on something, or just need to kind of talk through any of these items. Be happy to have that conversation, and we look forward to seeing you all again in August.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. We are now moving on to the next agenda item, to call the audience. And our assistant city manager has been managing this process. We typically take comments from Zoom participants. If you are a Zoom participant, you can either raise your hand in the lower box of your Zoom, or if you're a call-in, Kyle will also manage call-ins and go from there. So Kyle, I'm going to let you take it away with the Zoom participants. And as always, please keep your comments to 3 minutes, and I will be timing you.
Thank you, Mayor. So for those that are on Zoom, if you don't know how to use the raise your hand feature, down in the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little bar that pops up. If you click on the participants tab, within that pop-up, it'll say raise hand. If you do that, I will call on you. Okay. First up, Dana, go ahead.
Good evening, City Council. Can you hear me?
Yes. Good evening, Dana. Thank you for coming.
Of course. My name is Dana Park. I'm a new resident at 583 Ferndale. So I wanted to thank Jordan, Ryan, and David for their presentation. My background is actually in public health, urban planning, and housing. So I'm really pleased that Ferndale is really dedicated and committed to affordable, inclusive housing in our city. I just wanted to share a few thoughts on the presentation. I agree a range of solutions are needed, so I think the strategies laid out by Ryan and David are really quite comprehensive. I'm especially appreciative of their focus on stakeholder engagement, authentic community engagement at all stages of planning and implementation are really going to be critical. I'm very supportive of the zoning changes recommended. Zoning changes are essentially a free policy tool for the city to implement, so they can have a tremendous impact increasing density and affordability, though I do recognize that we'll need to include education of our community on the need for affordability to counter any NIMBY attitudes or negative attitudes. I've actually worked on legislation in Colorado to create an inventory of publicly owned land for a similar purpose, using public land for affordable housing. So I agree it's a great tool, though I do echo council members' concerns and questions on whether there is enough affordable land or public owned land in Ferndale. So just curious exactly to see some examples. And then another point, I know, again, with the AMI, I know that 60 to 80% AMI range is in line with a lot of the federal programs, though I really would urge Ferndale to strongly consider deepening our affordability whenever possible to even lower AMI levels. Especially now with COVID, many household incomes are taking a big hit, and of course housing is a really big major determinant of health. So I think at this critical juncture, as city is about to implement this and approve the strategy next month, we really should strive for maximizing affordability, increase the numbers of affordable units we require of developers, deepen our AMI levels, and lengthen affordability requirement periods where possible. and just to really demonstrate our commitment to inclusivity and addressing affordable housing. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dana, for your comments.
Mayor, next up is Alan Hale. Go ahead, Alan.
Alan, good evening. We're having trouble hearing you.
Hey there, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Welcome.
Thanks for the time this evening. I just wanted to give a shout out to the city, Joe, Kara, Raylon, Mayor Piana. Thank you all so much for helping participate in the ADA 30th anniversary celebration that the Ferndale Accessibility and Inclusion Advisory Commission has conducted. I think I've been really proud of seeing the ways our city has stood up to be accessible to people with disabilities, and I'm really looking forward to what's ahead for us as well. I did want to take this moment to also reflect on the housing plan that was presented. I think Kat summarized it pretty well. A lot of the words, I would say there's a lot of A words out there. There's availability, accessibility, and affordability that often get confused. But for those in the disability community and people with disabilities, accessibility is a capital A word. So I think in the report, be careful how we use accessibility and to make sure that we mean it where it's stated. And I think there's great data available in what that means for Ferndale when you can look at the 2010 census data and soon the 2020 census data. So yeah, I'm just hoping that reflects in the future state of the report.
Great comments. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
Mayor, next up is Dale Vigliarolo.
Good try.
Yeah, I had it in my head and I got nervous. Sorry, Dale.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Welcome, Dale.
Hi, how y'all doing?
Can you say your last name for the record?
Vigliarolo.
Thank you.
Vigliarolo. Has to roll out of your mouth. I just wanted to comment on the affordable housing plan. I had the privilege of working on the committee, and it was fascinating, educational, and mind-boggling, to say the least. It's a big, big thing, but it's a very, very, very important thing. And I really appreciate, I'm getting a little older now, and I really appreciate the fact that this is being addressed. When I'm around town, people are always, oh, we can't afford to live here, blah, blah, blah. It's just so nice to see our town taking an active interest in this situation, or whatever we call it. I also wanted to take a quick second and thank the Chamber, the DDA, all you guys for the work that you've been doing for our businesses in the community. Several people have come to me and said, wow, if it wasn't for the Chamber, if it wasn't for the DDA, I wouldn't have been able to secure my loans. That's big stuff. So to know that we're out there for our community business people, to me, is a very, very, very important, and it makes me feel very warm that we have this here. So love my town. That's it.
Thank you, Dale. Good to hear from you.
Next up, Mayor, is Christian Rice.
Good evening, Christian.
Hi, everyone. One thing that I heard from Jordan was he mentioned something called the in-law suite, and that I want to know more about, because, and that wasn't, I don't think, mentioned during the LSA or LMA, sorry, my cat's talking. That wasn't mentioned during the following presentation. I know of two people in Ferndale that have a smaller house or smaller residence behind their house, and I'm assuming that's what he's referring to. And I find that having that, if you guys put that to the front of other things, basically that I consider something passive. Like you guys are just defining rules that would allow residents to increase density on their lawns. I'm assuming that's what that means. So there's a lot of talk about developers doing things, and that's going to require a lot of city council effort. But something like that's passive, where you're just defining rules for residents. I've always thought about that. I've always thought about just throwing a small house on the, right on the back of mine, because I live in St. Louis, really big backyard.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's what you guys are talking about, number one. And number two, I would love for that to be front loaded and presumed to be something passive, so that you guys can do the hard work after that, So that's mainly my point, and just I would love to get more information on that, or see more information on that. So that's all I have.
Christian, I would love to have staff talk to you a little bit more about that. And just to let you know, the technical name is called an accessory dwelling unit, an ADU, and it's what they call, which is a nickname, is called a mother-in-law suite, which is just a smaller unit on your property. So it's not another house behind the house. But I hear what you're saying, and I appreciate your comments tonight and listening to the presentation. This is the type of feedback we're looking for.
Yeah, and also I'd like to mention that it's not just for. Thank you for clarifying so it is a separate dwelling though on the same property, correct?
It could be multiple ways. It could be on top of your garage, which we're seeing some of them in Ferndale. It could be behind your garage. It really depends on the footprint of your property and the policy that the Planning Commission and Council adopt. So your feedback on how that policy should be crafted would be really helpful.
I love the idea. I honestly do love the idea, and that, like I said, the developers are going to be there's a lot of work to do with there, but when you're dealing with residents, just dealing with the rules that you set in place, they're doing all the work for you, so it's very passive once you guys get set that up. So I think I am gonna, who do I email on, Jordan, on that, or to get more information?
Yeah, you can email jtwardy, TWARDY, at ferndalemi.gov.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for getting involved and lending your voice.
And Mayor, I don't see any other raised hands, so we'll go to the phones. First up is last 43145. Go ahead.
Welcome, Mike Flores. I know your last 4 digits now.
Yes, good evening. Good evening.
I don't remember anybody's number.
So my name is Augusto Mike Flores, as the mayor has correctly identified, from Whittington Street, and I am pro Ferndale. First, I want to thank everybody who's worked on the LSA report. I actually participated in the, I believe it was the February community feedback session, that snowy day, and I would just encourage the team to, if the budget allows, and hopefully it does, for additional feedback, just because I do know that that was a very snowy day, and even though we did receive a lot of participation, I think that maybe we would have received a lot more participation had it not been that snowy day. So just keep that in mind as you move forward on that particular project. I would like to proceed with some additional comments. One is in regards to transparency. Again, I continue to urge the city to be as transparent as possible. Please try to identify any costs and monies being voted on the agenda. Tonight's item 8B fails to identify a cost of $538,000. Next topic, financial oversight, the $2 million loan. I continue to not understand why council approved a $2 million for capital investments without understanding the details prior to the vote. I encourage each council member to add up the cost of the change orders for change orders 1 through 5 on tonight's presentation. For reference, that adds up to be $2.7 million. I also encourage council to add up the funding sources on page 134 of the agenda packet. And for reference, that adds up to $2.8 million. The simple exercise resulted in no loan required. I understand that a $1 million upfront cost must be put up by the city that will be reimbursed by developers in less than 1.5 years. Worst case scenario, a $1 million loan is needed that would be paid well before the requested 5-year loan term. If you review the summary on page 135 of the agenda packet, none of the numbers match to the simple exercise details or totals we just did. I am unable to reconcile any of the numbers. I created my own debit and credit T-chart to try to reconcile the numbers, which I emailed to everyone on council on Sunday. I took each change order, reviewed each resolution approved by council in the supporting documents. I watched the associated city council meetings, and I still was unable to reconcile the $2 million loan. I asked council, please explain if you are able to reconcile the $2 million loan. Item 3, financial oversight and transparency. Parking shortfall due to COVID requested to be subsidized through the inner city $2 million loan. For the past few weeks, costs, including the obligation or operational obligations. It seems the answer is yes. I've asked before, and I'll ask again, if council did not approve the $2 million loan, would there be any risk to meet any of our debt obligations or operational costs related with the parking, with parking? Why is it that after the loan was approved, it has been identified that the loan would be used to subsidize any operational costs? Item 4, if time permits, I have one suggestion to help with community engagement. Can council meetings be added to the city's Facebook events page, similar to what the city's clerk's office did with multiple dates? Can the year's city council meetings be added in a similar format so they are available and easily accessible to the community via the virtual world? As always, thank you for your time, consideration, and feedback. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
And that's all the call-ins, Mayor. I don't see any other raised hands at this time.
Excellent. All right. Well, I will hang on. Let me get my agenda. That is the conclusion of Call the Audience then. And now we are going to move on to consent agenda, and I will read them this evening and then have council vote. All right. 7A, approval of minutes of regular city council virtual meeting held July 13th, 2020, as submitted by city clerk. 7B was pulled and moved to 8C under the regular agenda. 7C under consent is request to backfill a CED inspector position to be open upon the resignation of an existing employee effective August 12th, 2020, as requested by Human Resources Director. 7D, request to backfill a DPW supervisor position to be available as an existing employee is retiring effective October 14, 2020, as requested by Human Resources Director. And 7E, approval of the bills and payrolls as submitted by the City Manager's Office and subject to review by the Council Finance Committee.
I move to approve the items on the consent agenda as read by Mayor Piana.
I support.
Moved by James, supported by Mikulski. And Madam Clerk.
Mayor Pro Tem Leaks May,
Yes.
Councilmember Mikulski,
Yes.
Councilmember Polika,
Yes.
Councilmember James,
Yes.
and Mayor Piana.
Yes. And that passes. And next we are on to the regular agenda. And the first item is the consideration to confirm appointments for boards and commissions. And you will start seeing regular appointments for boards and commissions on the second meeting of every month for our new process. And we are now on to July. Madam Clerk, would you like to introduce this item?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This month we have a number of vacancies. We did receive 4 applications from community members interested in applying for the 2 alternate positions we have for the Board of Zoning Appeals. Michael Borsellino and Nicholas Monk both applied for those positions. I believe Nicholas is with us tonight. Also, Sean Tobin applied to the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority, and Marciano Gongora for the Accessibility and Inclusion Advisory Commission. I believe Marciano is also with us this evening.
Excellent. As part of the appointment process, it is my practice to review all candidates and talk to the city council liaisons who are a part of the or representing council on a board and commission, and then call and talk to the candidates as well. So I'm really pleased with these residents stepping up to volunteer their time and talents to support the city on these boards and commissions. And so why don't we start with the first one on the list, because we have Marciano, I'm going to butcher your last name, Gargora, I think, to the Accessibility and Inclusion Advisory Commission. And then Marciano, if you want to say a couple comments.
Absolutely.
You are more than welcome. So welcome this evening, and thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Mayor, and hello, council members. I'll keep this very short and brief. I just wanted to thank you, everyone, for giving me the opportunity to come here this evening and share. My residency in Ferndale is rather short, just over a year now that I've been here, but my love for Ferndale goes way back since when I first got my driver's license. I lived in Warren, so I would commute here all the time, hang out at the coffee shops, and I just fell in love with the area. And I'm so fortunate now to be back in the community, and I'm really looking forward to serving it.
Excellent. Well, thank you for being here, and I look forward to your input on the Accessibility and Inclusion Advisory Commission. They're very active.
Great. Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. And I also believe Nicholas Monk, I believe that's how you say your last name, Nicholas. If you would like to say a couple comments as well.
Hi, yeah, can you hear me?
Excellent, yes, welcome.
Perfect. Hi, yeah, I'm Nick Monk. I've lived in Ferndale for several years, probably like 7 years. As a renter, I finally purchased a home on West Maplehurst last year. So I am super excited to be chosen as an alternate on the Board of Zoning Appeals. Watching that the Affordable Housing Initiative presentation was super exciting, and I hope to do my part to responsibly support those initiatives and possibly through zoning initiatives or variances actually kind of affect that kind of change. So super happy to be here, happy to serve, and yeah, thanks for the introduction.
Excellent. Are there any comments or questions from council? Excellent. Not hearing anything. Everybody, I appreciate your support of our residents. Thank you. Madam Clerk. Oh, sorry. I need a motion. We need a couple motions, so getting ahead of myself.
I will attempt to combine these into one motion. I move that we confirm the mayoral appointment of Marciano Gargora to the Accessibility and Inclusion Advisory Commission for a term ending December 31st, 2022, and confirm the City Council appointments of Nicholas Monk and Michael Borsellino to the Board of Zoning Appeals as alternate members for term ending December 31st, 2022, and confirm the mayoral appointment of Sean Tobin to the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority for term ending December 31st, 2022.
Support.
Moved by James, supported by Mikulski. Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Mikulski.
Yes.
Councilmember Polika.
Yes.
Councilmember James.
Yes.
Mayor Protem Leaks May.
Yes.
And Mayor Piana.
Yes. And next on the regular agenda, moving on, is the consideration of change order number 5 for the DOT project. Oh, sorry. Yes, it's not our last one. We have one more item after this. Consideration of change order number 5 for the DOT project. City Manager.
Yes, Mayor, Council, good evening. Please give me a moment while I bring up my presentation. Can everybody see that presentation?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, so I will introduce this item, then briefly walk everyone through this presentation. So, as you mentioned, this is the second in a series of change orders that we had predicted would come in February. We had said we would come back with those, and they would not exceed $1 million. This is the second, and the first one that was presented for about $283,000. We'll walk through the history of change orders momentarily for this project. But the sum did not exceed $1 million as we anticipated. So we are here to kind of walk you through that today. And I thought it would be helpful because this is a project that has about 4 to 5 years of history on it. If you begin to the site selection process in 2016, there's a significant history here, and I think it's important to just walk back at times and recast. So the specific history we're going to be focusing on is the change orders for the DOT. The DOT has seen 5 change orders at this time. The initial balance in the auto parking fund, the cash reserves, was set aside for the use of contingency purposes in the beginning of this project. The initial contingency amount in the parking fund cash reserves was $1 million. And the first change order that was deducted off of that was approved by City Council on August 5th, 2019. Here in the image on your right, you kind of get a snapshot picture in time. We've been photographing the site via drone throughout the duration of the project. I'm looking forward to a time lapse being completed together to show that progress. But on your right, here you see us below ground. We discovered some subterranean issues. It was related to complications and inaccuracies in the underground survey where utilities were run, or thought to have run according to the survey document. Sometimes utilities aren't where they say they are, and historical documents are incorrect that go back decades. So that caused significant cost drivers. Those cost drivers caused the change, and I summarized kind of the change, and you're going to see this theme throughout the change orders. The change was we had to redesign the temporary earth retention system, or TERS, and that is that wood fence that you see right here. That contains all of the site activity within the site. It's very important to make sure we preserve the integrity of adjacent property structures. Number 2, we had to redesign the foundations, and this is a significant cost. Initially because of the soil content, and if you look back at historical presentation records, there was a concern about the foundations and that we would have to do deep foundations. Fortunately, we're actually to convert this to shallow foundations. And so we opted to accept that change order because that reduced the total project costs net. And it also helped improve the project, excuse me, the project construction timeline. The total cost was $585,036. The second change order was in direct response to the economic development support, finally approved by the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. Initially, the city and the developer, Versa Wanda LLC, presented a public-private partnership to develop affordable office, street-level retail, and affordable housing on the DOT as the mixed-use component. It was a package that was in the culmination of over 2 years of a public bid process for a developing partner who was willing to commit to a project that would achieve these goals. So the state initially had us for approval in May, but due to the election, there was a change up of the Economic Development Board with the MEDC, and that ultimately deferred our decision till October. In October, the MEDC board did express support, and so they, with that, we could essentially greenlight some of those changes to the structure to accommodate the fourth floor of the office space, as well as accommodate other code-related and design-related changes that would be required for any office space that would be activated on top of a deck. Specifically, the changes we're looking at, we had to finalize the design and installation of the central elevator shaft that would serve the office. That is a code requirement. We would have to change the stairwells and other code requirements for the infrastructure. That was significant. Those changes had to be, we had to accommodate those changes, we had to modify the original structural design for the actual parking deck itself, because now this is a real thing and the state supported the project. We also, with this change order, over-engineered the columns, the load potential of the columns to support a future installation of solar panel, and that was a forward-thinking, future-proofing kind of maneuver. The Brownfield Development Board approved the use of brownfield development funds that we had available in uncommitted fund balance to support that. It was about $33,000 committed by them, so that was a huge commitment by that board that really is going to enable this forward leaning sustainability investment when we can afford it. There were also some additional construction changes for existing storm and sewer infrastructure for the underground detention system, and I mention that because it's another important sustainability goal. So this is one theme that you're going to see is the amount of strategic objectives that were planned for and are being delivered for in here. So this is not just a parking deck when we look at the cost. You actually have a 10-year underground stormwater detention system that's going to help manage the rainfall and manage excessive stormwater. It is produced at either end of the property along that alley. So that's going to be very helpful in managing stormwater in this spot before. And that was certainly an improvement upon previous option that was in place for the parking lot. There's a total, the total cost for that was about $366,910 as noted in the council packet of that month. Change order 3 was the fourth floor office. This was the February 5th meeting where we brought to City Council the reality that there was a cost discrepancy between what was provided to the developer, the true cost of the fourth floor, and we ultimately navigated a direction moving forward, and that direction was the city would pay for the fourth floor, to complete the fourth floor of the office space, and that would complete the parking portion and the future office portion, and we concurrently renegotiated a development agreement with the developer that recognized this discrepancy, and it then gets added back into the redevelopment terms, which I'll speak about momentarily. At that meeting, I also announced that we expected up to $1 million of unrelated changes. When I say unrelated, I mean unrelated to that specific fourth floor item. So they are related absolutely to the office. A significant amount of them are related to the office development because a lot of those design-related changes were already in motion for November. And so we had already essentially begun forward with the process of those changes. So we had to make some adjustments, and some of those changes are still in place today. So when we are coming out of COVID and Versa is ready to develop that office space, we are ready to just develop. And so we're in a positive position moving forward. March through May, COVID-19 happens to the world. That suspended construction and ultimately delayed the completion date for our project, which was targeted for May. We actually couldn't construct till mid-May, and we didn't really have a full assembly of our construction crews till we walked into June, post-Memorial Day. The first of the change orders that I said will come in February came on May 5th, and we would have preferred to bring them all together in one package, but coming out of the pandemic, some of these small businesses expressed the need to be paid for the work that they had already been committed to for the project. And so we chose to phase this into 2 phases. This was phase 1, as you recall from that meeting. And the total cost of that was $283,769, total net cost of that. The cost drivers of that change order were, again, the structural modifications for the future office space. Those were already in process, as I mentioned, so those still had to be paid for. And code-related changes in the basement level for fire suppression. We also had some changes to the future retail space that needed to be adjusted. The majority of those costs were related to the developer, and I'll get to that at the summary slides at the end. After that meeting, we brought to council a modified development agreement that specifically was designed to, one, create actionable milestones for reimbursement from the developer. So we had to actually reevaluate the method of payment and the frequency of payment based on the changing circumstances around the pandemic. So before the pandemic, the developer was still actively marketing the office space. They were getting a lot of leads. After a week within the pandemic, if you recall the city council meeting in late March, I did announce that unfortunately the lenders backed out of the deal, and the state also changed the terms of the deal because of the pandemic. And so we are still the state remains interested in the project, but at this time they suspended all of their commitments to several commitments to several projects in several cities. So we're not the only bystander of this. This is really just a consequence of COVID-19. And so we are still committed to the delivery of the office space. Ferndale downtown is still an attractive asset. The market study for the long term is still there for the potential downtown office space. So in this development agreement, we netted out the cash reimbursements from the developer to the city, and we also renegotiated the deliverable timeline. So right now, the developer's focus is on delivering the retail space along Troy Street, building the affordable housing residential development along Allen Street, and then they have within 2 years to make progress towards the fulfillment of the office. And there are clawback provisions within the agreement if they fail to meet these obligations that free the city up to pursue alternative development partners. Change order 5 is where we are at today. This is a snapshot of the construction site from a few weeks ago. We are moving along, progressing nicely, and I'll get to that at the end of the slide. At the end of the slideshow, the cost drivers for this still are continuing with the previous one. Many of them are office-related changes and redesign-related changes. The design changes affect both the parking structure and the office development, so there's a split cost on both sides. Specifically, there are code-related changes for the elevator shafts, the water pump room, and storage rooms. You'll also see a change order related to fees due to COVID-19. They are still actively negotiating on our behalf, but there are some fees, especially equipment fees, that are being assessed back onto us by other vendors. There's also just extended costs to everyone working for the extended period. As I said, the construction was slated to end in May, and we're going into September, and so there's a cost associated with that. All those costs are carrying forward. We also had some supply issues with the lighting vendor that ultimately influenced us to make a decision on the lighting change for the West Troy Street lights. The cost of today's change order is roughly $538,000. So I summarized the kind of fund distribution of these change orders. The change orders costed by fund, really you look at the distribution as the parking fund taking about 58% of these. The reimbursable development costs take about $948,000, and the water fund with the other related sustainability and infrastructure improvements are about 6%. The other two are negligible. So the majority of this is the parking and development reimbursement costs. I would caveat that the development reimbursement costs, we compartmentalize those because we're thinking about those all the time as we issue invoices around the reimbursements for the development agreement. But ultimately, the parking fund is responsible for front loading that and will be reimbursed per the development agreement over time. That is showed here. If you want to question as to why the short-term loan up to, and that's a key distinguishing point, it's up to $2 million. Up to would suggest that the final total is not yet determined. And as I've said in several previous council meetings, that final total won't be determined until the year-end budget reconciliation is completed and our financial auditors ultimately come in, audit our books, and give us our final financial position statements. And those statements are published every October and November and received by council during the December public meeting, as they were in last year's December public meeting. So if you look from top to bottom, you have $1 million. I had alluded to that in the beginning of the presentation. That's the initial parking cash reserves that we talked about. Those are uncommitted reserves, meaning they're not tied to any asset values, they're not tied to anything else in the system. It's important to make a point here in that this project it lives within the parking system any changes to the economic position of the parking system affect this parking fund and this project fund. That's an important point because as you see and you tick through, we have less change orders. And I actually threw this on here as an exercise to illustrate that point. I don't actually understand the total operating costs impact of COVID-19, but it's a reasonable estimate for me at this time that I can assume we've lost over $500,000. We average almost $100,000 in operating revenues. That's not net, that's just gross revenues. We average more than that now on an average basis on a monthly basis. So conservatively, I just plopped in $500,000 there to illustrate the point. If your operating revenues are gone, you still have expense obligations and you still have debt service obligations around this bond payment. And we've been making bond payments since last October. So you have all kinds of operating obligations and debt obligations that you have to consider. So that initial $1 million cash reserve fund might not be $1 million because we haven't had consistent operating revenues since February. Much like any other downtown parking system or downtown development authority that is associated with the parking system. That's a product of the pandemic. So the point of this slide is to help illustrate that the parking project, the DOT, lives within the parking system. It's a subject of the fund. We can't separate those and treat them differently or distinguish those. The other point I could make to that, there was one question as to what happens if the parking fund isn't able to generate sufficient revenues to pay the debt service on the bond. Like any bond, whether it be parking, whether it be water and sewer or streets, ultimately the city's general fund is the security of that bond. This was why City Council chose to ultimately increase parking rate revenues prior to the project. If you go to the February 4th, 2019 meeting, this is discussed as the first priority of why we would raise parking rate revenues and generate additional revenues for the parking structure and the parking system prior to the construction process, because although it would have been preferable for some of the small businesses to delay that rate increase, it ultimately would have been fiscally irresponsible because you're not putting yourself in a positive position for the parking fund to support the debt service payment. Of course, all of that was not thinking about a pandemic. And right now our focus is, again, completing the project and making sure that the DOT and the West Troy streetscape, which is a shared street design concept, which means there are no curbs, it's one flat plane, and it's designed to provide accessibility to pedestrians, to multiple modes of transportation, and to really be a place of people. So it is designed specifically to support the challenges that we're facing right now with a dense downtown that lacks adequate pedestrian public safe space to address current social distancing needs and physical distancing needs that ultimately will support the street. So our current focus is to complete this project and restore the asset to the downtown and really support our businesses. And so right at this point, we are still on target for a completion date of mid-September. We are running through on the home stretch. I'm very pleased right now. They are working through installation of the West Troy streetscape right now and adding on some of the cosmetic finishes to the alley and the side. You'll also notice glass paneling from local supplier Madison Heights Glass in Ferndale. They're supplying all of the facade glass for the stairwells and for the front West Troy streetscape. So with that, I will take any questions and I thank you for your time. Excuse me, I got a cold.
Thank you, Joe. I'll open it up to council for questions for additional information.
I don't have a question, but I would like to make a recommendation. I'd like to recommend that after we complete our financial audit, that we put a full cash flow and allocation breakdown out on the DOT website, ferndale.com, just in the interest of transparency to make sure that everybody understands cash flow, where the money has come from, where the money is going, any losses that we are expecting, things of that nature.
Absolutely, Councilwoman. We would be happy to do that. And we will be well positioned to have that information and just compartmentalize it. We have the routine audit. It's done every year by a third-party outside firm. We will do that, and we will step it up 1 degree and say, hey, we also want a compartmentalized statement around this, and we will post that on parkferndale.com and the dot. Happy to do that.
Thank you.
I would make the motion to approve and authorize the city manager to execute addenda to the AIA agreement with Colasani Construction in the amount of $388,614 from the Parking Capital Funds 585-000-977-000 and $147,439 from the Water Capitals Fund 592-000-977-000 to be charged to those accounts.
I'll second.
Supported by Polakos, seconded by James. Any comments with the motion made? Greg made it. Are there any comments, Greg? I'll start with you first as the motion maker.
Just that, I know that government finance is very, very complicated. It's not something, that you can compare to running even a small business. It's finance for a government is really comparable to a major corporation because of the various accounts and the various forms of income that are coming in and how things have to be allocated. So I understand when people have maybe a difficult time seeing where things are coming in from and going out as, because I've been on council for 7 years, and it's only been within the last couple of years, about 4 years, that I've really understood city finance. So it's never really crystal clear, but I do want to agree with Laura, Councilwoman Mikulski, that I think a final budget of all the funds that were approved and spent once the project has been wrapped up would be an excellent idea presented to the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Any others?
Through the chair,
please.
I'll just comment. I appreciate that you provided so much context and background and with links to previous agendas and previous change orders. I know that sometimes putting all of this together seems really overwhelming and challenging, and puts a fine point on the investment that we're making here. But I appreciate you not shying away from that and putting it all there when it might have been a lot easier to just piecemeal it and focus on one. So thank you for that.
Those are good comments. Yes, so a lot of the change orders started last year when there was a different council makeup. And so a lot of carryover into this year as well, as the development project is more than 1 year long in duration for this size. I just wanted to say we knew this change order was coming. It was given us a complete heads up in February. The first change order was approved so that the smaller contractors would not be left without cash during the pandemic and that they could survive the first 3 months of the pandemic. And so here we are from the heads up in February that this was coming. I'm disappointed that we keep having to do change orders, but change orders are somewhat of a part of the development process. Of course, again, as I've always said, I'm very disappointed that we had to have the one around the $1 million, and that is still being investigated behind the scenes by our legal department. But our focus is on getting the project done, and I'm very glad that September is our target date. And overall, I think our city team has done a very good job managing the impacts of the pandemic on the development project, given all the complexities around making sure safe construction and supply chain delays, which I know there are still a few here and there that you're experiencing with the construction company and suppliers. So I just want to say I trust you guys to do good governance and of our money. That's why we hire you, and oversight of the construction company, which we will be holding them accountable, or whomever the investigation results in. So thank you. All right, Madam Clerk, we have a motion on the table. Can you do roll call, please?
Yes.
Or roll vote.
Councilmember Polika?
Yes.
Councilmember James? Mayor Pro Tem Leaks May?
Yes.
Councilmember Mikulski?
Yes.
And Mayor Piana?
Yes.
Sorry, I think I was muted earlier, so my yes might not have been audible, but it was a yes.
Thank you for clarifying. All right, and that passes. Next on the regular agenda is the consent agenda 7B, moved to 8C, and it's the approval of the disposal of abandoned property per city ordinance as submitted by Police Chief. Councilwoman James requested this moved, so I will ask her to introduce and ask her questions.
Sure. So I had this pulled from the consent agenda, really just because it raised questions for me about, what our process is for trying to find the owner of especially lost property or found property that's turned into the police department. And I got answers to all of my questions, but I thought it made sense to sort of invite a little bit of explanation in the meeting, because I imagined that residents might have similar questions. So in a nutshell, I emailed the police chief asking just really some basic things like, what steps do we take to find the rightful owners? It seemed odd that there was wallets and IDs on the list. Why couldn't we find the rightful owner of a wallet and ID? Do we provide public notice other than this item on the agenda before items get auctioned? And so I was provided with some answers, but it might be appropriate at this point to have Chief or his delegate comment on the process.
Yeah, through the chair, I believe you do have Chief Palazzolo and Lieutenant Dave Spellman here. We can give them a moment.
Yeah. Good evening, Council. Detective Lieutenant Spellman handled this from the beginning, and I brought him in today to kind of talk about the process and answer all your questions. So, Lieutenant Spellman, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chief. Basically, what it really boils down to is that we have two types of lost property. One where we know who the owner is, like in the case of the wallet and the IDs, and the others where we can't identify an owner. What we typically do, according to the city ordinance with a known owner, is the ordinance says after 20 days we need to we contact them first, and after them failing to claim the property within 10 days, then we put it up for a public auction. Our policy goes above and beyond that. We wait 6 months. In the case of these wallets and IDs, we waited almost 2 years. They were unclaimed by the owners. What we do is a public notice in 3 areas throughout the city, and it can pick conspicuous place. We typically do more than 3. We do postings at the police department, the city hall, the community center, the fire halls, along with, in today's day and age, we would use our social media platforms and our city websites. Keep in mind, we haven't done an auction in over 10 years. There's only 10 items on this list. I think that speaks to how well our officers and our property clerks identify the owners and get the property back to the rightful people. In the second case where there's lost items where we don't identify an owner, we also wait 6 months before doing the same public notice and holding an auction after the 10 days has expired.
Thank you. I appreciate you sent me a little bit more thorough information with some citations to ordinances to help sort of fill in those gaps, and I appreciate that. The other issue that I brought up in my questions had to do with, it's becoming increasingly clear that for some residents, contacting the police is not something that that everyone feels comfortable doing. Some people feel like there are times where members of the population can contact police even for help, but end up being in a vulnerable situation. We'll put it that way. So for a resident who has who's lost something, is there any point of contact in the city that they can reach out to other than the police department to make that inquiry?
At this time, typically when they contact another city department, maybe City Hall or even DPW, they are directed to us. In my experience, since I've been managing the property room, people don't seem to have a problem recovering their property. In fact, they're very diligent about it. They call several times a day. And when we set up appointments to get it back to them, they are prompt and they don't appear to have any issues getting their property back. With that being said, we would certainly be open to other avenues. A lot of people contact me by email, through our website, or by phone leaving voicemails, but we would certainly be open to other avenues. But in the end, we physically have the property. They would have to come to us at some point, and we would have to verify their identity and that they're the proper owner. How we get to that point, completely open to options and finding new avenues of approach.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lieutenant, this is Councilman Polika. Is that interaction, that in-person interaction, is that something that could possibly take place in City Hall, example, instead of at the station itself?
Absolutely. That wouldn't be an inconvenience to us at all. Right now during COVID, many of the interactions have taken place in the parking lot or outside of our building, even on City Hall property. So we've already kind of adjusted and done that to make people feel more comfortable with social distancing and not having to come into the lobby.
Excellent. And I just have one other question. And you have two descriptions. You have recovered and found. I'm assuming recovered means someone reported it stolen or lost, and you recovered it, and the other one is just found by someone and turned in. I'm amazed that there's items that were recovered but not picked up. That amazes me.
Yes, just to clarify the 10 items on the list, the recovered items, this report is generated from our CLEAR system, so it's looking at it from a different verbiage. The recovered items were actually stolen in the possession of an arrestee, and we recovered them. But we were unable to identify an owner, the rightful owner.
Okay, I understand.
The found items were originally lost, and we had found them. So I know it's confusing. I apologize for that, but it's more of the report system we use.
Okay. That makes sense of the recovered. So thank you for that clarification.
You're welcome, sir.
Are there additional questions from the police? Excellent. I think these are always good to review since it's been a while since we've had this come to council. So good questions, Councilman James. If there's no further questions, we need a motion.
All right, in response to the deafening silence, I'll move to
Everybody's excited.
Right. Move to approve the disposal of abandoned property per city ordinance.
Support. And just for clarity, you know, a lot of times the silence is because we're searching for the recommended action in our documents. It's not because no one wants, you know, people understand it's not because we're avoiding, you know,
yes.
emotion. It's like, okay, where is it? Where is it? Where is it?
I appreciate that clarification and trying to find your unmute button. So I heard a motion by James and there was a tie, but I'm going to go with moved or supported by Polika. Madam Clerk.
Councilmember James?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Leaks May?
Yes.
Councilmember Bukowski?
Yes.
Councilmember Polika?
Yes.
And Mayor Piana?
Yes. All right, that concludes our regular agenda items. We typically have a smaller agenda in July because of the summer months, and I'm glad we're done. And we're going to move on now to the call to council, and City Manager Joe is going to lead the staff reports as that are necessary and warranted. So thanks. Joe, take it away.
Thank you, Mayor. Leading off in tonight's lineup is Dan Antosik with the DPW. Dan, you're on.
Good evening tonight, Mayor, Council. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Well, today was another beautiful day in the city of Ferndale. A little bit hot, a little bit humid. Not our greatest, but got to work with what you got. So right now we got the 2020 pavement improvement program going well. Really happy with the work that's being done. Contractors are performing. 2020 water main improvement program is going well. We're finishing up, well, getting towards the end of our water main project that we're doing over on. Contractor's been going well with that. And then in addition to our cured in place pipe, contractor is back in town now that we're into the new fiscal year, doing sewer cleaning and sewer lining in various areas throughout the city. And then, so overall, a lot of the projects have been going well, keeping on schedule, so we're happy with all that. And then I know a lot of residents have been wondering, you know, when is SACRA going to be a thing again? When can I drop off the things that I can't normally drop off with my curbside waste? Well, SACRA is now, they're not fully open to the public, but they are taking appointments online. So you can make an appointment, drop off your household hazardous waste or other objects that you normally could not put out to the curb. And we understand at the DPW that not everyone is tech savvy or has access to a computer at home. So if there is some disposal items that you need to drop off at SACRA, but you're not able to make that appointment online, give us a call at the DPW and we'll make that appointment for you online, let you know the date and the time that you can drop that stuff off so you can do that. Other than that, it's mostly business as usual with the DPW. We do encourage people. We do still have the water meter replacement going on. And if you have not had your meter replaced thus far, we do encourage you to give us a call, contact UMS, our installation company that's doing the water meter installation, schedule an appointment to get that water meter upgrade. and keep that project moving forward. And that's all I have tonight, Council.
Thank you, Dan. Up next, we have our City Clerk, Marty McGrath.
Thank you so much. So I do have a few things. So we have the August 4th primary election coming up next Tuesday. Just wanted to go over a bit about the continued absentee voting process and also kind of talk about our protocols for in-person voting. So absentee voting is still operating and available, and that can be done anytime through 4 p.m. on Monday, August 3rd. On that Monday, you cannot take the ballot out of City Hall, so you'll have to vote on site. But right now we are operating our elections division down in the City Council chambers to allow for more social distancing upstairs and down. Excuse me. We are also continuing our drive-through voting program. We have now done 4 sessions with 2 left to go. So tomorrow night and Wednesday night from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. Interested voters can drive, bike, walk, scoot, skate, whatever moves them to City Hall parking lot, and we will take care of issuing their ballot directly. If they're in their car, they don't even have to get out. So it's a very safe, secure way to take care of that. Also, we're encouraging folks who have requested an absentee ballot and have waited more than a week or 10 days to get a hold of City Clerk's office. Come and talk to us, because it might be time to issue you a replacement ballot if it got misplaced in the mail. So along with those hours, City Hall is always open the weekend prior to the election. So this week we will be open Friday, Saturday, and Sunday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Again, those will be service hours in the council chambers in our new temporary election digs. We do request people bring photo ID. If they do not have a photo ID, they're welcome to fill out an affidavit noting that they're not in possession of an ID. Anybody who who registers 15 days prior to the election or less does need to provide proof of residency to the city clerk's office. So anybody who has registered in the 14 days upcoming to the election, if they have an opportunity, they can swing by City Hall. We can get them set up with an AV ballot or give them the receipt that they'll need to take to the polling location with them on election day. In-person voting, of course, is Tuesday, August 4th from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. At this point, we have all of our precincts open. We do have a reduced number of precinct inspectors. So we have had a huge turnout with absentee voting. We've issued over 5,700 absentee ballots, and our voting population is just a bit less than 16,000. So that's really great. We haven't received all of them back yet, but it's very encouraging to see this many of our voters embracing the opportunity to vote safely from home. But for those who do want to come in person, expect social distancing. Please wear your mask. Will not refuse service to any voter who is not wearing a mask. But for the safety of our poll workers and other voters, we do request that all voters do wear a mask. If they don't, they will be asked by the precinct chair if they would like to do curbside voting from their car, just to for everybody's comfort level. But we'll get to that when we come to it. And also a reminder, City Hall is closed to business that is not election related on Tuesday, August 4th. During the March 10th election, we were so inundated with new voters and folks coming up to verify their residency that it sort of swallowed all other business happening in City Hall. So we feel that because Precinct 8 has now moved to the council chambers from the Autumn House, I think we've recommending that the City Hall was closed, and council was kind enough to grant us that request back in June. And just a note on all of the wonderful election improvements that County Commissioner Zach mentioned earlier. I was very proud and pleased and honored to serve on the council that came up with those recommendations. So I am on top of all of them. And unless there's any questions for me, I think that's it.
Through the chair, if I may. So with COVID, everyone's noticed that mail delivery has really dropped to like 2-3 days a week they're delivering mail. With your experience, when do you suggest people consider not mailing their ballot back and just dropping it off at City Hall?
We have already been encouraging that for about the last week. So our understanding is that nationwide, the Postal Service has a very large number of their carriers out right now for whatever reason. So we also at City Hall are not getting, mail every day, just like everybody else. But we recommend that if it's been, with just a week to go, we would suggest that you drop it in one of our drop boxes. So we have secure drop box locations at the Kulik Community Center, City Hall, and we have a new drop box also. We have the one at City Hall that's attached to the building, the small black box, but there's also next to the mailbox, the blue mailbox for the Postal Service, there is a ballot drop box there as well. And for folks who can't get out to take care of that, I would ask that they contact the city clerk's office. We will make arrangements to come and pick up your ballot if need be. We do not want anybody taking the chance that their ballot isn't going to count. So with just the issues with mail service right now, we would strongly encourage at this point not putting anything in the mail.
Okay. I will promote on social media.
Thank you.
Joe, you're muted.
Darn it. I almost got through without doing that. Just one point of clarification. City Hall departments are open. We're just operating remotely. So you can still please call City Hall if you need to contact anyone on that day. City Hall itself is just going to be focused solely on election-related business. But the departments remain operable. We've proven we can stay open throughout a pandemic. We can certainly do Election Day. Second, I just want to acknowledge, I think what Marty was alluding to, she was appointed to the Oakland County Election Task Force, and she's been serving with several commissioners. So I just want to acknowledge that appointment and the work that she's done. She's another example of a Ferndale director taking a leadership role in the region, and I really appreciate those efforts.
Thank you, Marty.
Zolo, speaking of leadership, why don't you talk to us about accreditation?
Absolutely. Evening, Mayor and Council. Will be one of my last updates on accreditation because we are at the very end of the road for this.
Woohoo!
July 21st and 22nd, we had our on-site audit. It lasted almost a full 2 days, and we've talked about this numerous times. They combed through everything we do. They did a full on-scene walk around through the entire department. Made sure that everything that we say we are doing, that we're actually doing in the form of various proofs. At the end of the day, on day 2, we sat down and we did very well, very well. Very few issues needed to be addressed. One example of a standard deviation is performance evaluations. We have never had them. They will be done by the end of the year, so we have the forms in place. We are working on all the training, and then by the end of the year, that proof will be uploaded, and we'll send that to the accreditation board. That doesn't stop us from moving forward. And just to kind of put it in perspective on how big of a deal this is, there's over 550 law enforcement agencies in Michigan. There are 24 that are accredited through the MACP. 6, us being one of 6 that are in the pipeline. And I will go sit in front of the accreditation board September 15th and 16th, and then we will get our final approval at that point. After that, we will set up a council date, probably the first one in October, and the MACP board and the accreditors will come. It's a pretty big deal, and they'll present the police department and the city with our official accreditation. You know, I was up north for Sergeant Brown's last day, but he came back for the on-scene accreditation, and like we've said before, we could have not have done it without him. But it was a whole team effort from not only support from council and the city, but all the officers as well. So we're pretty happy that this is over, but really it's just the beginning, because you just don't get accredited and then it's over. You continue to strive to collect proofs and to do better. And as time goes on, they will add more points of standard, which we will have to comply with every year. That is what I have. If you have any follow-up questions about accreditation that you haven't asked before, I'd be happy to answer those.
Nope, I'm just really proud of the team, and man, I really hope we can do an in-person celebration.
Well, we will, one way or another, September 15th to 16th, I might be there with just the team, but I'll be in that chambers accepting that accreditation award.
I will join you if I am able.
Figure it out.
With the mask on.
There you go.
Thank you, Chief. I would also add, I was part of that accreditation process, included an independent interview with me with various questions about the police department and policies and just relationships with the executive office. And I was really pleased with the participation and the people who were conducting the interview. It was really cool. And I did learn throughout this that the Michigan accreditation program is based on a national program from CLIA. So I had received a few questions about the basis of Michigan's accreditation protocols and standards. And it's my understanding that Michigan's is based on a national program, which is CLIA, which is best practice national standards, which involves a detailed national board that helps govern those standards, and they're revisited. So great job, Chief, as always. And it was I look forward to joining you in the celebration as well.
Absolutely.
Next is our Community and Economic Development Director, Jordan Torty.
Sorry, I thought I was also unmuted. I apologize. I just wanted to announce pretty quickly, this is still sort of under final reviews, but we held a webinar on July 20th for businesses. One of the things that we're doing with the business support budget that council approved back in April is trying to find ways to meet the needs of our business community during the coronavirus. One item that was identified even before the pandemic was opportunities for shared advertising. So we've been interviewing some tech firms to try to find opportunities to create a sort of a back-end pilot where we could lower the cost for all businesses to participate in these kind of digital advertising opportunities. And so we're recruiting tentative interest now from businesses. We had a lightly attended but highly interested group of businesses at that webinar, and we're going to be reaching out to the business community throughout the city for that. Please contact the CED department if you're interested. We'll also be giving our council members some ammo on that, some information about what the pilot could be, because we'd be looking to bring that to you for your consideration if there's sufficient business interest. So I would ask the business community, if you're not getting the business newsletter, to please reach out to us if that's something you'd be interested in, and we'll be recruiting out there.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I think Erin Quattel, I don't think she's attending, but Jordan, can you speak to the resident request for alley vacation? I think that's going to be a sneak peek agenda item for August 10th.
Joe, I apologize. I'd have to do some digging on that one. I'm not prepared off the top of my head to speak on that one tonight, but I will get a full briefing out to council this week. I'll prioritize that for tomorrow.
Wonderful, thank you. The public hearing, I believe, is set for the August 10th meeting. Working our way down the list, we have our Parks and Recreation Director, Lorena Wheeler.
Nope, you have Emmanuel here today. Apparently, I have Lorena's name on my Zoom profile. So I have a few quick updates for you guys. First of all, we have launched our new registration system, Amelia, which will be replacing our active system. that will now serve as the hub of how our residents and community members register for our programming, get in contact with us on different stuff. It has a lot of functionality, and we are encouraging anybody that had an active account or anybody that's interested in participating in Parks and Recreation programming going forward. We want you to, when you get the opportunity, log on to Amelia and go ahead and create your profile. If you go to the city's website at ferndalemi.gov, it should have information about how to access the page, what are the reasons that we implemented this change, and how it would benefit our residents and everything like that. You'll also see, if you go to our Amelia storefront, you'll see that we have our dog park classes back up and running. We'll be running virtual dog park safety classes for anybody, any Ferndale resident that is interested in signing up for a membership to the dog park. That will take you through some of the different safety things that we encourage amongst dog owners when they participate in activities at our dog park. Those will be happening every second Thursday of the month from 7 to 8 p.m. via Zoom. So when you go to register for it through Amelia, you'll on your receipt, you'll receive a link that will take you to where you're supposed to be on the day of the dog park class. With that, we are also now accepting new members for the dog park, and anybody that transfers from Active over to Amelia who needs assistance with that process or who needs their memberships, their dog park memberships, their Kids Corner memberships, that stuff transferred over to the new system. I need you guys to email me, Emmanuel Johnson, at ejohnson@ferndalemi.gov, and I'll be able to assist you going forward. We've already got a lot of the memberships transferred over, but we need to make sure that we are servicing everybody that we're supposed to. And so if you're having any problems, please contact me. We also still have our sport kit program going on every Monday and Friday at the Cooley Community Center from 3:30 to 4:30. We've been giving away kits with different sporting equipment in it. So we've had kits that have included basketballs, kits that have included soccer balls, kits that have included playground balls, along with other little miscellaneous items like like sidewalk chalk and playing cards. So that will be going forward for an additional 2 weeks. We are also starting our pop-up play program in partnership with the YMCA that will be taking place at Wilson Park every Monday at noon, from noon to 1:30, and at the Kulik Center on Mondays and Fridays from 2 o'clock to 3:30. And I believe, big thing. On Thursday, August 6th, we will be holding a virtual splash pad design meeting for Martin Road Park, where we're encouraging residents and anybody that's interested in it to come and participate and give their ideas about what they want the splash pad at Martin Road Park to look like. Again, that's going to be next Thursday, August 6th at 6:30 via Zoom. Information about how to access the Zoom meeting will be posted on our Facebook page and on the city website. And the session will also be recorded for anybody that is unable to attend. And after the session is done, we'll also be posting an online survey for people to take and give their input about what's going on with the splash pad at Martin Road Park. And that should be about it.
Through the chair, if I may add a little bit of information, I'm really, really excited about the splash pad community input meeting. Back in 2014, I had resurrected the Parks and Rec Commission after it had gone defunct from the Great Recession, when the city could no longer afford to invest in our parks. The Parks and Rec Commission pretty much went by the wayside, and so I helped resurrect that commission, and a number of great residents joined in, and part of that was working with then Director Jill Manchik on the 5-year master plan for the Parks and Rec Department. And part of that included a survey, and the survey results from the citizens, I remember there were over 400 results, which was really big for that type of survey results. But one of the top 5 requests out of that survey was a splash park. Another one was a skate park, which we've just put in Gary Park, but the splash park, if I can recall, was number 2 on that list. So I'm really excited that we're going to have this meeting. At the time, we couldn't afford it, so we had the residents vote on a bond, $2 million parks bond, and the response was incredible. And the splash pad was actually listed as an item. So this is one of the last deliverables I see for that parks bond. So I'm very excited to see this finally coming to fruition.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that recap, Greg. It's always appreciated. And Emmanuel, thank you for pinch hitting tonight. Good to hear from you.
No problem.
And finally, sorry, I'm ticking through my updates. I think that has covered everybody except moi, and I will use this opportunity just to just generally update some work that the Ordinance Review Committee is doing that I expect will be coming into August. So we have two ordinance updates that I expect will be ready for approval consideration by council. One is for a boards commissions general framework update, and the second is related to public surveillance ordinance. Both of those ordinances are being reviewed currently by council. And then in September, I expect us to move forward on progress with the short-term rental ordinance update, as well as potentially a rodenticide resolution and ordinance. And that's all I have for you.
Excellent. Thank you, Joe, for doing that. Next is call to council with council members. And to be honest, I don't remember who I started with at the last meeting. So I'm going to start with Mayor Pro Tem Leaks May.
All right. So first, I'd like to acknowledge that and inform you all that it might have been mentioned earlier, but July 26th yesterday marked the 30th anniversary of the the ADA Disability Act. So please visit the website, the Facebook page to show all of the interesting facts that we've been sharing on regarding ADA accessibility throughout this month. And I look forward to continuing to keep that document that we adopted just recently alive at the council level. One way of it was made known to me that with the inclusive housing affordability and action plan, ADA wasn't mentioned in there even once. So it's important that further discussions do include that, because we do have a population here in Ferndale that would like to be included in that sense. So just to be mindful regarding that. I would also like to point out that just really send out a word of support to our police department. I, for one, think that you guys are doing your due diligence in trying to provide better communications with residents, providing more accountability within the police force. And I, for one, have heard more great things about you than not. So I just want you to know that as your councilwoman, I support the efforts that you are trying to make. And I look forward to furthering those collaborative efforts and building bridges between you and council, as well as you with the community, because we're all in this together. I mean, times have been a little difficult lately, but I want you to know that for the most part, you are all supported, and I'm really proud of the efforts that you're making to make the department better. So I just wanted to let you all know that. I believe that's all that I have to say for tonight.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And next, why don't we go to Councilwoman Mikulski?
I only have one item tonight, and DPW had mentioned Sakura earlier. I wanted to let people know that Sakura is offering an on-site, or actually off-site, collection event tomorrow between noon and 5 p.m. for household hazardous waste, electronics, cardboard, and styrofoam. The location is at the Troy Aquatic Center parking lot. That's 3425 Civic Center Drive. And I will post the link to that event on my Facebook page and on the various Facebook forums.
Thank you very much. Next to
Did you lose audio?
It wasn't clear, Mayor Piana, who you said.
Oh, Polika, Councilman Polika.
Oh, okay. Well, I got nothing. I think I talked enough during call to staff. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilwoman James.
Two quick items. One, as part of my role on council, I am our delegate to SEMCOG, the Southeast Michigan Council of Governments. And recently I was appointed to their legislative policy platform task force, which I'm really extraordinarily excited about. This is exactly why I wanted to get involved in SEMCOG, because these policy platforms are really the guide that the organization uses to exert its regional influence on the state legislature to advocate for what Southeast Michigan communities want and need. So in our first meeting last week, we talked about, everything from transportation and climate crisis, statutory revenue sharing, to fireworks, and a lot of stuff in between. So I want to thank Council for appointing me as the SEMCOG delegate and giving me the opportunity to have these conversations and to help craft these policy platforms. And as this develops, this was our first meeting. We will have another in September, another in November, and by the end of the year should have our newly revised policy platform. I will keep everyone informed as to how this develops. The other item that I wanted to mention is that Citizens for a Fair Ferndale has wrapped up the individual sale of Black Lives Matter signs. We have delivered over 2,000 signs. Wow. Locally. We've raised just shy of $4,000 for the Detroit chapter of Black Lives Matter. And even though our sales are technically over, we may or may not have some stashed aside, in particular for bulk sales. If anyone wants to buy 10, 20, 30, 40 and up, we may be able to procure them. So if you're interested in that, email cff48220@gmail.com. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And finally is me, and I have a couple comments tonight, and just wanted to thank our city clerk, Marnie McGrath, and Jordan Smelly for the drive-through voting. The amount of time and effort it's taking of their time, in addition to normal working hours, to put this pilot program in place. I just want to thank you for your commitment to doing this, because the residents that I saw who drove up and biked up and walked up really loved having the opportunity to vote safely in a new way. And I just wanted to thank you for innovating and innovating a new response during the pandemic. And in the last minute, I was there to be interviewed by Channel 7 for the 8 Mile Woodward community meeting Thursday, and they pivoted immediately to doing a story on drive-through voting. And so thank you for participating in that last minute, and also for Jordan to encouraging us to do a live video. I thought that was fun. So thank you. Next, just as a reminder, this Thursday from 6 to 8 is the 8 Mile Woodward intersection community meeting. And both cities and our residents adjacent to the 8 Mile Bridge are encouraged to attend, but it's open to the community via Zoom. And I hope people will come and listen and learn what's been done over the last few years and how both cities with our residents plan to move forward. And finally, I just want to say thank you to Mayor Pro Tem Weeks May and residents Rebecca Phoenix and her friend Jeff Locke and resident Jen Kadia for suffering through humidity and heat yesterday to disperse meeting flyers to the streets adjacent to the 8 Mile Woodward intersection, basically from 8 Mile, Edgewood, and Woodward, and on the east side, Bennett, East Bennett to, Jewel. And tomorrow morning, Laura and I are going to hit a couple more streets in that neighborhood. And I just wanted to say thank you for committing to making sure our residents are aware this is meeting. Not everybody's on social media, and so wanted to have everybody have the right information to log on. All right, and then finally, I just want to talk about the pandemic. You know, we're really in this odd spot as a nation. A lot of people are, really uncertain about their family's future, their individual future, their job's future. There hasn't been a good coherent strategy come out of our federal government to protect American lives, and I'm just really proud of our governor and other local leaders and county leaders for demonstrating leadership to inform and protect the public and being transparent and using data to actually help make decisions. And on top of the pandemic, we are definitely in an era of widespread social unrest. And I'm hearing from my friends and family how much anxiety that is causing. And it is causing me anxiety too. Honestly, I've had some sleepless nights or insomnia nights. And I know some of you have too. You're definitely out there on social media at 3 a.m. saying you have insomnia. And I get it. But really what we need to do is be wearing our masks. And Ferndale, you are really doing what it needs to do to protect yourself and others. And these are the best tools to stop the spread of the coronavirus and get us back to, back to school and back to work in a way that I don't want to say normal, but back to something that where our lives are not so disrupted. And so as of today, we have 19 cases in Ferndale. At our peak, we were at 200 and I think 212. So a significant reduction, but nonetheless, we need to stick to the science, sticks to data, and really I'm asking residents to make sure that we stay focused on the data and the good information, and please do not spread misinformation or conspiracy theories, because at the end of the day, that really just hurts all of us, and we need everybody to do their part. I'm really optimistic about our future. We're already seeing the reopening efforts, albeit still cautious with how we do that, but I am hopeful that the end will be near. Vaccinations, a vaccine will be identified, and we will get through this. And I'm committed. Our staff have definitely been committed to protecting our community in the best possible way. And so wear your masks, still be safe, please still stay 6 feet apart, and do your part. And that is all for tonight. And I thank you for participating in your local government. Good night, everyone.
Good night.